afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to the January 13th, 2021 Legislative Platform Workshop. I'd like to ask the City Clerk to call the roll.
Vice Mayor Haddishelt?
Yes. Here.
Councilmember Albert?
Here.
Councilmember Rakucci? Here. Councilmember Mendoza? Here. And Mayor Bernasconi?
Here. Thank you. I'd like to ask Councilmember Albert if he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
You bet. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to ask our City Clerk to please read the meeting procedures.
Good afternoon. Pursuant to the executive order executed by the Governor, and as a response to mitigating the spread of COVID-19, the meeting of the City Council will allow members of the public to participate and address the City Council during the meeting. There are two ways to accomplish this. Public comment may be submitted by telephone during the meeting and prior to the close of public comment on an agenda item by calling 916-774-5353. If you call, you may be placed on a brief hold until the attendant can answer. Please be advised that the broadcast is delayed by up to 30 seconds when watching at home. When your call is transferred to the City Council, you'll have 5 minutes in which to speak to a regular agenda item and 3 minutes for public comment on items not on the agenda. I will monitor your time and let you know when your time has expired. When calling, please do not use the speakerphone option, as it may create difficulty for the City Council to hear your comments. And make sure the volume on your television is turned down to ensure that there's no echo or interference. Public comment will also be accepted by email at publiccomment@roseville.ca.us. Comments received by mail will be summarized by general topic and be made part of the public hearing record. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will move right into our item, which is the Legislative Platform Workshop.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Bernasconi, and good evening, members of the City Council as well. I'm Megan McPherson-Scheid, the city's Deputy City Manager, and here tonight with me is Mark Walensky, our Government Relations Administrator, and a really strong team of government advocacy experts. First, I'd like to give an overview of the whole legislative advocacy process in Roseville. The platform that we're here to discuss tonight guides the advocacy strategy that our team uses. It guides the Law and Regulation Committee and also the Government Relations team as they seek to oppose or support legislative and regulatory rules at the state and federal level. What powers our strategy are our partnerships. We work very closely with community partners such as the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, chambers of commerce throughout the region, the Roseville Coalition of Neighborhood Association, and cities, counties, and special districts. We also focus specifically on certain issues with partners, specifically in the utility realm and the IT realm and the public safety realm, which is listed here. The Northern California Power Agency, the California Municipal Utility Association, Regional Water Authority, the IT, I don't know every acronym there, but that stands for IT, chiefs throughout the city, and then also police chiefs. The engagement that we do with our community and also with our legislators is what really activates our strategy. We have monthly meetings with our legislative representatives, and that's with Assemblyman Kiley and with Senator Nielsen, and also with our representatives at the federal level. We have advocacy efforts at the state and national capitals, and that is in partnership with some of these associations, but also on their own if there are specific issues that pertain to priorities that you'll discuss in the platform tonight. We also work closely with our lobbyists, developing testimony, with regulators, developing advocacy letters, creating tours, and we've proven very successful with these efforts over time. So tonight we're here to discuss that first element, which is very foundational. It's our legislative platform workshop. It's a critical step in developing the actual platform, and that's the foundation for our city's advocacy program. It also, and this is really critical, it provides the filter for the council's legislative and regulatory committee agendas. So it allows us to act flexibly, quickly, and be really responsive to legislative and regulatory rules that are coming before various bodies. So this well-articulated platform, which is before you, ensures our active participation to influence decision-making at the state and federal level, and also to support funding issues consistent with the city's priorities. It also informs the types of issues and discussions that take place before the Law and Regulation Committee. And this year, Vice Mayor Haudeschelt will be the chair of that committee, and Councilmember Mendonça will be the other member of that committee, with Mayor Bernasconi as the alternate. And that meets on a monthly basis for those who are interested in what the city's looking at in that area. With an ever-changing political environment at the state and federal level, the city's development of this strategy in a timely and effective manner is crucial to our success. We can't overstate the importance of the effort. And this is very much a citywide effort. All departments have been involved, have reviewed legislation specific to their areas, from HR to public safety to the utilities to public works. And they've flagged what has significant implications to their operations. And are there any questions that the council might have at this point before we ask for some insight from our lobbyists? Okay, great. We'll move right into hearing from our lobbyists about the political environment at the federal and state level. And I would say this is probably the most interesting one we've done in the past 10 years, most interesting time. And first, we're going to kick it off with Mike Miller from the Ferguson Group, who's been with the city since 2000, working with us and has a deep knowledge of our efforts. And then go to Jason Gonzalez with Gonzalez & Son at the state level, who has the same depth of knowledge, by the way. We've been working together with him for a very long time.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here in front of you this afternoon, Mayor and council members. We really appreciate the opportunity to work with and on behalf of the city of Roseville. And Jason and I have both said in the past that your staff is truly professional and is really focused on the interests of the city, as you know, has been the council. And it's always a pleasure, and it's in fact an honor to have been able to work with you folks for the past 2 decades now. And we look forward to continuing that work on your behalf and in cooperation with you folks. Just real briefly, I'm sure we're all shocked by the events at the Capitol last week. But I can say that I'm reassured by the fact that we're continuing our communications with both legislative and federal agency offices, and both the legislative and agencies, both offices remain highly responsive to our communications. So the business of government is going on, and it's important because now that we're moving into this new administration and a new Congress, it's great that the city, remains actively involved at this particular time, because there are going to be a lot of changes on the horizon, and there's still a little bit of unfinished business with respect to COVID-19 that's probably going to be a top priority of the incoming administration as well as the legislature. So I'll briefly outline several points that I think will be important to the city as we move into 2021. I'll try and be real brief in my comments. And if you have any questions at any time or at the end, please feel free to let me know. And if I can't answer those, I'll get right back to you and staff with responses. So as we move into this new administration and a new Congress, COVID relief funding will probably remain a top priority for both. And we and the city will remain actively engaged in efforts to work toward local governments receiving direct relief, and we'll continue to provide updates to the city on how that is going. We anticipate a very large package coming out very soon in terms of direct relief to individuals. Probably will include direct relief components for cities and counties. And on top of that, we would also see, probably not together, but in parallel, an infrastructure bill that would probably include transportation, water, other types of infrastructure that are relevant to the city's interests. And, we'll be working with the congressional delegation on those priorities as those legislative efforts pick up. But in the first 100 days, it's very likely that both the administration and the House and Senate are going to come forward with a major infrastructure package. A couple of one-off notes. The Paycheck Protection Program, which you may all be familiar with, that's interest-free loans that are made to businesses that have suffered due to the coronavirus, which in turn become forgivable, provided that the individuals who take the loan abide by the rules of the loan. There's a new round that just opened up this week, and the way that it's working this time around is that the Treasury Department is focusing a lot of its loan capacity on small community-based institutions. So rather than going to the very large institutions, as has typically been in the past, you'll find that there's more outreach to local institutions in Roseville and in the region, which would be able to make loans available to businesses and individuals who need that additional support. And again, those loans, provided you meet the requirements, are forgivable, 100% forgivable. One other point on that is important for the chamber folks to know, and businesses to know, is that if a business has already received a PPP loan in the past, they are eligible for another loan in this round if they need to. So you have a second round available to those individuals. And those are open now for all. We've talked a little bit actually quite a bit with staff about the housing interests of the city and how relief has been coming and in some cases not coming from the federal government in that regard. And a large package of housing relief funding has recently been released by the federal government. And in fact, the deadline for counties to apply for those funds, which would then hopefully make their way down into Roseville to assist folks, that deadline for the county to apply was yesterday. So I don't know for certain, I can't confirm whether the county made that application, but that's something that we've been talking with the city about. Another point that's going to come up this year a lot, assuming some things happen very early in this new Congress, is we've talked a lot about earmarks, congressional earmarks in the past. And that's the situation where a member of Congress can include a line item in an appropriations or in some cases an authorization bill for a specific project. And all indications are that this is the year that Congress is, for the first time since 2010, going to begin earmarking projects in appropriations bills and again possibly authorization bills as well. So we're set for that. If that should come to pass, that they do go forward with earmarks, and we should know within the next, anywhere between 2 and 4 weeks whether Congress is going to do that. We're ready to go with, city projects that are eligible for earmarking, at least under the old rules, certainly. And the focus of earmarking, if it does come to pass, is likely to be cities and counties as well as states. And we're going to be looking at earmarks almost exclusively for infrastructure projects. And the city's federal agenda does include very specific projects that we think would be likely to be successful if we carry them forward. Cybersecurity is another matter that's going to be taken up by both the legislature and the administration in all likelihood in short order. And we'll continue to be in touch with your staff on cybersecurity and telecoms issues as they mature during this new Congress and new administration. Those are the highlights We continue to work with your staff on developing and amending your city's federal agenda as new issues and old issues arise. And with that, I will stop, ask if there are any questions at this time.
Council, any questions? We'll start with you, Councilmember Alvord.
I wanted to ask a couple questions. The first one was on infrastructure. And it's my understanding that in the current administration really harmed the infrastructure ability that came down to the states, and so which greatly affected our matching ability. So instead of a 50-50 match, we had to come up with a lot more money to do things like widen roads. Do we expect this infrastructure funding to affect that matching and make it more easier for local jurisdictions to do big projects? Is that what we're looking forward to?
So I appreciate your question, and it's an important one because it means in some cases tens and even hundreds of millions of dollars when you're talking about matches for larger projects. There has been over the years a trend towards increasing non-federal matching requirements for particularly infrastructure, and there's also been a lot of emphasis on not just creating self-help communities, but also on bringing in private investment in infrastructure. As we move into this COVID relief mode, it would seem that would be an area where the federal government, at least temporarily, might look towards reducing or even in some cases eliminating non-federal matching requirements. And in some programs, they have already done that. They've taken programs that previously had 80-20 federal, non-federal matching requirements and have actually made those 100% federal. So we are seeing that. It will be very interesting to see how the new administration in Capitol Hill pick up that point. One other item on that is there's indication that this legislature and the administration are interested in looking at infrastructure that is, for lack of a better term, green. And as we move into that, you might see more interest in reducing or eliminating non-federal matching requirements for projects that are in line with those the goals of the green programs.
Great. And my second question had to do with the housing relief funds. It's a big umbrella term, and so I was just curious, do you have any idea on renters versus landlords? Is it just relief on the renters? Do they somehow help the landlords who have mortgages as well? And how about, is there anything for actual homeowners that are maybe right at the edge of being able to afford their own mortgages? So just curious if you have an idea of what that actually means.
Yeah, it's a big program, hundreds of billions of dollars. We have looked at it specifically from the perspective of whether there is child care aspects, and there appear to be provisions, for child care. As far as the details of, who recipients might be, how the assistance might be delivered. There are some provisions in the law. We have a brief that I can provide, to the council on that. It is the key though is that the direct recipient is the county, and so they'll be determining. Assuming that they did go ahead and request funding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Placer County exceeds 200,000. We're at about 350, right? Isn't that the population number? So, the county was eligible to apply, and the county will be the primary recipient. So, beyond that, there are some provisions guiding how those funds will be distributed. We'll see, how the county administers those funds.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilman Alvord anticipated one of my questions on transportation, so thanks for that. The PPP, everybody gets the last letter wrong, right? It's 100,000 per, or what's the amount?
So I would have to go back and pull up the exact amounts, but we do have a very detailed brief on that I can provide to you that you can forward to anybody that you would like to see have that information.
And I know in past, you've worked with our staff in environmental utilities on some WIFIA and other funding. As the new administration comes in, and I always get it wrong, is it authorization first and then appropriation, or is it the other way?
The great answer,
Appropriated?
the answer there is that it depends.
Okay.
And the folks from environmental utilities can also speak to that as it relates to
The
water.
general process is you get it appropriated and then you get it authorized.
Actually, it's the reverse, which, is somewhat nonsensical, but the idea is that the Congress would pass an authorization bill that would cover a program for a number of years. And then on the annual basis, then the appropriators would come in and say, in this particular fiscal year, this is the amount of money that we'll spend on this program. However, there are exceptions to that. And in fact, in infrastructure bills, you often see authorizations that act as appropriations. And in transportation, we'll be looking at that. In fact, the city of Roseville received a large earmark in a transportation authorization bill for the Interstate 80 widening that occurred about 12 or so years ago.
Great. So the more general question is, will there be a shifting of priority, and then, that may take some of that funding away? Too early to tell is an appropriate answer.
I think it really is too early to tell. Yeah, but there's definitely a goal, both in the incoming administration and in Congress, to take care of and improve existing infrastructure, go for some new infrastructure, and do it in a way that stimulates the economy.
And then a large general question: the environmental justice community is going to have a stronger voice in this Congress?
I think that's safe to assume that there will be a stronger voice, but there are competing interests, and it's always a battle.
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Councilmember Bondanta or Councilmember Rakucci, any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. My mind immediately went to transportation, and I think I've gleaned what I need from your answers and the questions. So if I think of anything else, I know how to reach you. But I think at this point, I'm good on my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Micah, just as kind of a general question, I think the state and national level and the world really got hit hard, and all the people involved with COVID and the cost with COVID, whether it's financial, emotional, everything. It just got affected. But so mine is a general question. As we're talking about looking at authorizations and appropriations, this is about money. Like how does this, maybe our new administration coming in, or even how do we look at our budgets, our treasury, our solvency? How's that checked to say, we'd love to help you and we want to give you tons of money, but back here, how much do I really, really have over a period of time?
And that is, a question that fascinates and confounds, so many people who look at it. We all operate on, family budgets. You operate on a positive, city budget. And if you have a deficit, you have to, take action to remedy that. The federal government is unique. They, can print money, and they can spend money, and they can run deficits and borrow. It's when you look at the amount of money that has been spent in 2020, it's really words don't express, the quantum change in the budget.
Mind-boggling might be a word.
And so you're right to look at that, and there needs to be attention to that. And in fact, bringing it down to one particular member, there's a conservative member from the Midwest who I spoke with recently, who's on the Appropriations Committee, very fiscally conservative member. But his view is that he will fight for as much cutting and rational spending as possible. Once the top line numbers are decided upon, though, he's going to fight for earmarks. So, this is, it's a question that's going to be, that's going to play out for
Ever.
presumably
Ever.
decades. It is.
Thank you.
Okay, I think those are all of our questions.
I appreciate your time, and I'm sorry I went on a little bit longer than I'd anticipated. Again, any questions, feel free, to contact me or your excellent government relations team. And with that, I'd like to introduce my friend and your excellent state lobbyist, Jason Gonsalves.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. And thank you, Mike, for the introduction. My name is Jason Gonsalves. I'm with the lobbying firm Joey Gonsalves & Son. Our firm has had the pleasure of representing the city of Roseville dating back to 2000 as well. Our relationship began when there was a former assembly member, now our dear friend, the mayor of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg, trying to shift your sales tax, and that got your attention. And over the years, we've shared in a number of successes, most recently the dissolution of redevelopment, which if you can call any portion of that a success, I guess we've accomplished a few items on that process. Very briefly, I'd like to give an update of the 2020 legislative session. As you know, COVID changed the way all sectors and the world operates, and the state legislature was not different from that. In March, they took unprecedented, unscheduled recesses. Most of the staff ended up working telecommuting and continue to do so. The 2,000 bills that were in place, or in the hopper, if you will, most were stalled. And ultimately, 428 bills were sent to Governor Newsom, of which 372 he signed. So far less than the 12 to 1,500 we would typically see in a legislative session, especially the second year of a legislative session, which 2020 was. Moving on, the November 3rd election, I think we're all familiar with Prop 22. It was the most expensive proposition in the history of the United States. $226 million was put in support of the gig versus Dynamex, or the labor community, and it was a result of Dynamex as well as AB 5 by Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez. The reason I bring it up is you've even seen this week legal challenges beginning to form as a result of Proposition 22 passing, and there's many other sectors of the state that were not part of the original AB 5 exclusions or exemptions that now want to be addressed. And with the undercurrent of legal challenges as well as the fallout of the battle from Prop 22, it'll be very difficult or interesting to see how particularly the Democratic majority navigates future efforts to further address Dynamex and AB 5. The makeup of the Assembly is 60 Democrats, 19 Republicans, and 1 independent. The 1 independent, ironically, is Assemblymember Chad Mays, who's the former Republican leader of the state assembly. That is a net loss of 1 Democratic seat. In the Santa Clarita region, former Assemblymember Christy Smith ran for Congress, and there were so many eager candidates, particularly on the Democratic side, to fill that seat that no Democrat made the runoff, and they ended up losing the seat that was held by Assemblymember Smith. Moving to the Senate, you have 30 Democrats, 9 Republicans, and 1 vacancy. The vacancy is Senator Holly Mitchell, who is out of the 30th Senate District, and she was elected to the LA County Board of Supervisors. Assemblymember Kamala Dove has already indicated her desire to run for the Senate. Which will result in a special election for the 30th Senate District, but also for Assemblymember Kamala Dove's seat should she win the Senate race. We also will have a special election for Assemblymember Shirley Weber, who was appointed to fill soon-to-be Senator Alex Padilla's Secretary of State position. So I guess the good or bad news is just when we thought elections were over, we will see a handful of special elections in California, and the makeup of the legislature as well as the administrative levels could change. We could likely see a number of agency secretaries moved to DC as part of the Biden-Harris administration. So some of that will evolve as obviously the transition takes place. A couple of key dates just to mention it by way of process. The legislature was scheduled to come back January 4th. They did not return until this past Monday, January 11th, because of COVID precautions and positive tests that were the result of the organizational session in December for the swearing in of new members. So January 22nd is the deadline for the legislature to submit language to Leg Council. And that's for any legislative proposals that you would like to have introduced that have to be submitted and put into bill format by February 19th. So the timeline for bill introductions has been compressed because of the delayed return. We have not heard of pushing that timeline out, although it wouldn't be totally surprising if the legislature were to do so. And we do anticipate 1,500 to 2,000 bills coming down the pipe between now and February 19th. All very much needed proposals, I'm sure. The governor, as I'm sure you've read, released a record-setting $227 billion state budget on January 8th, this past, a week ago, Friday. The budget projects a $34 billion surplus, as well as a rainy day fund or reserve. The budget did not include any relief or COVID relief for local governments. The expectation is that with the new administration, another round of perhaps federal relief, as Mike indicated, would include some relief for local governments. And we're awaiting that to hopefully take shape. The continued focus, obviously, will be COVID relief, eviction moratorium extensions, but also housing, homelessness, and public safety will remain a priority, particularly for both houses, but the Democratic leadership. We saw 30-plus bills last year introduced on housing, many of which the clock ran out on or COVID precluded their passage, but oftentimes they were proposing by right approval, ministerial approval of duplexes, as long as you had 4,000 square feet, I believe was the number of available space in your backyard, irrespective of access for public safety or to those units. So we will have our work cut out for us to continue to protect local governments' appropriately guarded local land use authority. And we will see no shortage of housing bills. One other early trend we've seen is proposals to provide sales tax exemptions for back-to-school supplies and whatever other items the legislature may come up with. And we will have our work cut out for us to ensure that the local government, your local Bradley Burns, either isn't too adversely impacted or exempted from the state's tax holidays, as they like to call them. And lastly, the governor's office, as with most administrations, the governor has had some staff depart. His chief of staff, Ann O'Leary, has left the governor's administration, is expected to be returning to D.C. under a Biden-Harris administration. Ann is being replaced by Jim DeBoo, who's a long-term Capitol staffer, former political consultant most recently, and I've known him for 30 years. He's a great guy and will be an asset to the administration. Jim will share executive secretary duties with Ana Mata-Santos, who has been a part of Governor Newsom's administration, but you may recall was the director of finance under both governors Jerry Brown as well as Arnold Schwarzenegger. So the horseshoe has some changes. The legislative secretary position Anthony Williams had, he's being replaced by Angie Way, who's been part of the Newsom administration but was the former chief of staff for the Labor Federation. So we will continue to see some changes, but we'll be prepared to continue to work with the mayor, the council, your executive team. And one thing I will note, amongst COVID and the challenges, the governor's office and the administration has been very responsive to local government's concerns. The ability to hold council meetings within 24 hours, we brought the issue up to Jason Elliott, and the governor had an executive order providing for what we thought would be temporary Zoom, but it seems will be doing a lot of remote work going forward. And lastly, as Mike mentioned, I would be remiss if we didn't, again, thank the mayor and the council, but your executive team, your management team. It's a tremendous honor to work with them. They're personal friends, but also you set a standard amongst the Sacramento region and the state of California, for that matter. These workshops and your involvement in Sacramento truly enables us to be successful. And I very much appreciate the time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. So long as I've talked with a mask on.
Well, thank you very much for your update. Shall we start with, want to start with you?
Jason, the other thing that you mentioned that I think is going to be paramount for us, and many things are, but it's the housing. Roseville's worked real hard over the many, many years on specific plans, making sure that we have affordable housing element and making sure we actually have a new project just came into be yesterday about having small houses put on very small lots, no places for parking, no place for, police and fire to be able to see. There'll be a lot of safety concerns for our residents, and a real surprise for us and surprise for them that we'd have no control on where things pop out. So I'm real hopeful that you'll have some magic there and can help us.
No, I appreciate that, and each community, as you know, is unique, and how those developments are handled at the local level could change the fabric of the community or the neighborhood, for that matter. So it's definitely something that, one size will not fit all.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, Jason, I think last year, if memory serves me, the governor introduced a bill that was 222 billion, right? And then by the time it got to the May revised, because of unexpected and certainly catastrophic events, it significantly reduced. Now we have a one-time windfall, right? Does that include any CARES Act funding from the federal government that we were anticipating? I've sort of lost track of that, but there was at one point in time some talk about having Washington reimburse, and maybe Mike covered this in his comments, but yeah, just curious.
There may be some CARES Act funding or COVID relief funding that the state has benefited from, but by and large, and Cal Matters this morning did a great piece on the state's over-reliance on the upper-income Californians. It's about 18,000 taxpayers make up 40+% of the state's entire general fund, and they've done very well despite the challenges of COVID. So in large part, the state received a windfall, if you will, on personal income taxes, even though the receipt was delayed, the filings until July. The numbers came in a lot higher than they had anticipated.
Right, and not for you, but for Mark. And, when we have our first meeting, it'll be good to get an update. At the end of last year, we signed on to a resolution about local control as a council. So that'd be good to get an update on that at our first Law and Regulation Committee meeting.
Any other questions for Jason? I feel like so many of us have so many questions that we don't even know where to start, but I appreciate your update and your information that you provided tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, Mayor Bernasconi, is a review of the legislative platform. And the first area of review are the requests for federal funding. So at this point, I'd like to hand the presentation to Mark Walensky, who heads up the city's government relations efforts, and he'll cover these items.
Good afternoon, Mayor Bernasconi and council members. Before we go into the final portion of the presentation, I just wanted to let council know that these aren't all of the changes. We won't be talking about all of the changes in the draft document that you've been provided. Rather, these will be some highlights of those elements. And if you have questions, obviously, about any of the changes in the document, we'll be available to answer those questions. So with respect to state and federal funding requests, we're looking at basically four new areas. One which Mike has talked about in great detail, which is transportation funding. And I might mention, all of these items are on page 6 in the red line document. And with respect to the possibility of a large federal infrastructure bill being passed, we want to monitor that very closely and be prepared to act on that if and when a bill is finalized. With respect to fleet electrification, including vehicles, charging facilities, tools, and training, with the acceleration by the state toward the use of electric vehicles, we have significant concerns about the impact that it would have on the city, including the cost, not only for the vehicles, but for the infrastructure to support the vehicles. So we'll be looking for funding for those opportunities for infrastructure needed to support the electric vehicles as well as the vehicles themselves. And then with respect to the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, or WIFIA, Marisa will be covering this in more detail during her part of the presentation, so I'll let her go in, cover that, and provide more detail to the council during her part of the presentation. And then finally, funding for technologies and projects to ensure water treatment and conveyance is resilient to climate and other natural disaster impacts, including power disruptions and other threats. This item has been added to the platform to address the new threat that public safety power shutoffs pose, particularly to our Barton water treatment plant and distribution system. And so that concludes this portion of the review, and I'm available to answer any questions that council might have.
Additional questions?
Yeah, last summer we had a discussion at council about body cams, and I know the police department was supportive of that, but I didn't see that in here as looking for funding for that, because we wanted to hold out and see if the state or federal government was going to provide funding for body cams. Is that in here somewhere?
It is in the public safety, and I believe it's item number 1 in the public safety platform. So it is, because as you recall during that conversation, council approved the amendment to the document, and that was included, so it now is part of the document.
Thank you. I just didn't see it in the summary, and I was worried that maybe it wasn't in there, so sorry I missed it.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Okay. And so with that, I would like to now turn the presentation over to Amber Blix, the Utility Government Relations Administrator with the Electric Department, who will discuss some of the Electric Department's changes.
Good afternoon, Mayor Bernasconi and council members. Like Mark said, I'm Amber Blix with the Electric Department. Kind of in diving right in on our proposed modifications to the utility platform, I'd classify the amendments that are occurring on page 15 as really cleanup amendments, but we did include some language there, including the importance on economic development, business retention, and expansion, as we know that's a city priority. And then we also add some language there on supporting flexibility in existing programs rather than more restrictions, and that's mainly in the context of the Renewable Portfolio Standard program that we comply with. In terms of critical concerns for the upcoming legislative and congressional session, those begin on page 21. And on page 21, we deleted concerns related to the phasing out of natural gas generation. Natural gas generation proved to be a very important resource in meeting 2020 demand as the state faced rotating outages and supply shortages. So this is something that we'll continue to monitor, but we don't see it as a critical concern for this year in 2021. And then the rest of the changes that I'll address are on page 22. The electric utility has currently suspended electric disconnections for non-payment as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as the pandemic continues, we will continue to monitor the impacts that this policy has on our utilities and our customers, in addition to monitoring any proposed legislation that would make this a mandate at the state or federal level. So we added language on that topic. In terms of electrification and electric vehicles, we also added language that speaks to providing the infrastructure to meet California's zero-emission vehicle goals and recognizes that the electric sector will be paramount to this transition. Jurisdictional concerns, following the recent wildfires, power outages, and heat wave, we have some concern that there could be legislation introduced to address these efforts that would limit our abilities to make decisions at the local level. And so we added language here to recognize the continued importance of local control and the ability to make resource decisions at the local level. And then finally, at the bottom of page 22 there on pole attachments, we deleted language that we had from prior years related to overturning FCC order on pole attachments. While this is still a concerning issue to us, the ongoing legal process is not aligned with the efforts that are already underway on the ground regarding pole attachments. So I'm open to any questions that you guys might have on the changes or the critical concerns for the upcoming legislative session.
Okay, Councilmember Haldershot, you want to start us off?
Yeah, Amber, I missed, and maybe it's the same reason as the pole attachments. The existing infrastructure, natural gas, fire generation, say that again, why it came off?
I think it's going to be a concern that we continue to tackle over the years as we move to kind of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but I don't see it as a major concern for 2021, which is this year.
It's not a near term, it's more of a, okay.
Yes.
Because I know our energy park has, right, that cogeneration. Thank you.
Great.
Any other questions for Amber?
I did, on the pole attachments, I know it's been difficult. We had worked with some of the companies and worked where they could put them, but now they can put them literally anywhere. Isn't that kind of what's happening?
Yeah, it's not so much for this purpose. I think what we're trying to address is there's still legal remedies that are trying to be sought out in the courts. And so previously in the legislative platform, we had talked about, those orders and fighting back on those. I think what's happening now as a result of like a lot of the shot clocks and things that are going on the pole attachments, what's going on in the ground is different than what's happening in the legal. So that's what we're kind of trying to distinguish here, that we're not going to continue to make, we're continuing to follow it, but the two are not matching up, if that makes sense.
Because I know that we've had some materials that have come to us and with language of working with some of the other agencies, and it was, where to put them and having a dialogue with the companies. But I just was, okay, so we're just kind of watching them as two different separate things, whether it's legislation or legalities or in lawsuits.
Yeah, I think what we're kind of saying is on the legal side, the battle is kind of, it has already kind of occurred, and so this is actually happening on the ground right now, so that's why we're taking it out of the legislative platform. But I agree that there are still continuing discussions going on about how to do that and what that looks like on the ground, and so maybe I can get some more background details and provide that to you.
Well, no,
to follow up.
I'm getting which it's already kind of a done deal, so there's no reason to really fight it, but I guess my concern too is a lot of these areas could be in anybody's neighborhood. I mean, they just walk up and put it on, and a lot of the residents will be giving us phone calls, because they do, of why is it there? Of just so that we have a relationship with that organization of saying, if you're going to put a phone on my street, I'm Company X, Company X tells leaflets or something out and says, hey, that's why I'm doing it.
Yes, and I think I agree that we're continuing to focus a lot of attention on those kinds of concerns. It's more of just the legal issues, which we're still continuing to track, but that ship has almost sailed in a way because of what's going on the ground. So that's what we're kind of trying to distinguish here. But of course, yes, it will continue to be a community issue that we will need to address and have outreach on, of course.
Thank you, Amber.
And if I could interject, Councilmember Rikuchi, we also have a page on our website that addresses the 5G and the attachments to the poles that Roseville Electric and our IT department and public affairs worked on as well to help inform the community. Because like Amber said, the rulemaking was done at the FCC level, but now we see it operationally in the community, so it's a lot more visible of an issue.
And we're getting emails and, concerns on why.
Yep.
Any other questions for Amber? Thank you for your update.
Thank you. I will now hand it over to Marisa Tricas with Environmental Utilities.
Thanks, Amber, and good afternoon, Mayor Bernasconi and members of the council. So the first proposed change from EU is on page 16 under the Resiliency, Greenhouse Gas, and Sustainability section. And so here we have expanded it to essentially include approaches that optimize our response to climate-related emergency events such as drought. As Mark mentioned, the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, I would like to just touch on and go a little more in depth as we've been working on this for a better part of the last year and a half. So we have applied for about $33 million in federal funding, and this will expand our aquifer storage and recovery program and also optimize our recycled water programs. We have now submitted this application to the Environmental Protection Agency and are in term negotiations. As EU lead for this project, I can say with confidence we expect to finalize the terms with US EPA in late March or early April. We're also very thankful to the staff in Dennis's department in finance and also Bob's department with the city attorney's office who have been paramount in helping us to close and do these negotiations. Continuing along to now page 18, for the first time, the platform now includes a wastewater and recycled water platform. As you all remember, with California's most recent historic drought, that highlighted the critical importance that we diversify the city's water portfolio. And one way we can do this is through water reuse. And as a lot of you have been briefed on, we've been doing this since the 1990s. Additionally, wastewater utility challenges are often driven by regulations, which lead to extra costs for Roseville's residents and our other regional residents. So now we have added this platform so these issues can get the attention that and focus that they really need and deserve. Additionally, the new wastewater and recycled water platform is significant as many regulatory changes that we face here at the City of Roseville often take years to prepare for and develop. Also, as in compared to the legislative process, which resets every year. A really good example of this is the regulation by the State Water Resources Control Board, which updates the laboratory accreditation standards. And this has been developing over the past decade. And was actually just implemented this year. So by monitoring and influencing the regulatory process, EU can now prepare both technically and financially for impacts that these regulations have. And then as pretty much every department has touched on, under critical concerns on page 19 with COVID this year, one component that we added was to ensure the legislature continues to consider scientifically sound policy that works to monitor community health and then prioritizes public health and the economy throughout the remainder of this pandemic. And as a scientist, this is near and dear to my heart. And one way that EU has been doing this is to ensure our water and wastewater workers are vaccinated with 111 miles of pipes under the city's collections underground. They're not seeable, but there are wastewater and water workers who are on the front lines. So we are working to get them vaccinated as quickly as possible. And thank you to Megan's group and Mark for helping us with this addition as we work with our associations to get this done. So given the time interest, I know Mark has a few of the last slides, but if there are any questions, feel free. Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, real quick question. We can take it to the first Law and Regulation Committee, but number 12 says oppose the promoted use of woven wipes. I know there's a lot of education around that, but, because they don't.
What was it? Sorry, Bruce, what page?
It was number 12 on page 18. Oppose the promoted use of woven wipe, right?
Yep.
That's what we're all using to clean our hands and our laptops and everything else, right?
Yes, that's a really great point to bring up with the pandemic and then also with the labeling of wipes or flushable wipes. They actually are not flushable. That is something that the wastewater utility is leading up to try to educate the public on the importance of not flushing the Clorox bleach wipes and also these wrongly labeled flushable wipes down our toilets. We really urge them to because essentially they cause a lot of clog and ultimately the residents end up having to pay for that. So that is something that we have highlighted this year and something that I'm working with CASA, the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, our local agency, to promote and hopefully get passed this year. It was not passed last year, that bill. Okay. So thank you, Bruce.
No, thanks for educating me, illuminating me on that one.
I had a quick question, and in the interest of time, you just kind of give me a 30,000-foot level on this. On page 19, very bottom, I was following it, and then after COVID, I kind of lost track of it. But can you kind of give me a snapshot of what that would look like as far as the zero emission, vehicles? I know for EU, we're talking about much larger vehicles, and that technology seems, I don't want to say behind, because that would mean that they're not doing doing the research and everything, but we're seeing more of the mid-size, we're seeing more of the light duty and heavy duty, trucks, non-commercial. But is this something that they're requiring us to phase in, 20, 30, 40 at a time, or do we have numbers on that, and what does that look like?
So with EU being such a large department, I might look to my colleague, Noel Maddock, who is handling this issue. Noel, can you answer that? Or Ken, if you're close. Good evening, council members. Noel Maddock with the Environmental Utilities Department. I cover the water and the waste services, so the solid waste divisions. For the advanced clean truck rule, they have created some regulations. Currently, they're in a process and we're working with Brian Craighead at the city, who does the fleet, manages the fleet for the city. He is in the process of producing a report. We are supposed to report on all of the vehicles that we have in our fleet, as well as potentially some of the fleets that come in and make deliveries to us. There is a mandate on the manufacturers at this time, but not on those who are purchasing the vehicles.
Okay, that's what I was kind of looking for. I didn't know if that had shifted or not, because I hadn't heard, but I hadn't been following it either, so thank you.
They have the first step, mandate on the manufacturers. Next step is going to be on all of the purchasers.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Great, thanks, Noel. And I know Mark has a few more slides, so I'll pass it off to him if that's any more questions.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marisa. And I'll be very brief. For other city departments' proposed modifications and critical concerns, there are 4 items. The first is additional pandemic stimulus funding, which is on page 7. A note that it's important not only to continue to advocate for the stimulus funding, but also to advocate for funding that comes directly to local governments, and that will provide greater flexibility on how that funding can be used. With respect to the Economic Development Department, item number 10 on page 14, the city will continue to oppose legislation that restricts the city's ability to dispose of real property or retain control over how that property is used. This clarifies concerns the city has with this issue. In the critical concerns on page 21, municipal-based district elections, previously the city had concerns regarding potential changes to district-based elections, but with the recent changes to the city's election framework, the city now has concerns with any actions or proposed legislation that dictates the redistricting process, which happens after every U.S. decennial census. And then finally, challenges with legislation mandating how housing is developed on page 23. Based on the recent changes made by the state regarding housing requirements, the state's continued focus of placing the responsibility for solving the state's housing crisis on local governments while neglecting to provide necessary tools to do so has hampered the city's ability to develop for housing to be developed in the city. The city believes it is imperative that the state provide municipalities with new tools they can apply to meet with the countless new housing requirements being imposed on them by the state. And in conclusion, as the new year unfolds, the government relations team will remain focused in implementing the legislative advocacy strategy and will continue to communicate the city's advocacy positions with the city's state and federal elected representatives, and with the city's state and federal lobbyists, and with our regional, state, and national coalition partners to ensure the priorities defined in the legislative platform are supported effectively. Council's input provided tonight will be incorporated into the final legislative platform, which staff will bring to Council for their consideration and approval at the second City Council meeting in February. And this concludes our presentation, and happy to take any input or answer any questions you may have.
Does the council have any further questions of staff? If none, I think this is the time that we need to open it to public comment. If there's anyone who would like to address this item, we ask that you please call in at 916-774-5353, or you can email your comments to publiccomment@roseville.ca.us. And I'll just give it a few minutes, and I know there's a delay. I want to thank you both for your presentation, and I know that we have a very strong team working on behalf of the city and the businesses and the residents. Okay, no calls, so I will close public comment, and we'll need a motion from our clerk, please.
The motion is to adopt the legislative and regulatory platform as presented. I have a motion.
Second.
Vice Mayor Haddishelt?
Yes.
Councilmember Albert?
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci?
Yes.
Councilmember Mendoza?
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent work, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, and we will adjourn until our 6 p.m. City Council meeting. Thank you all very much. 13th, 2021 City Council meeting. Before we move into item 5.2, I would like to take a brief moment and share the City Council's response to the events that transpired last week at our nation's capital. The attack on our democracy at our nation's capital has us grappling to find the right words to convey how we feel about the reckless terrorist actions we all watched unfold on January 6th. In Roseville, we stand together to denounce this violence. We believe in inclusiveness, regardless of politics, race, or religion, and our sole purpose for serving is to help our community. We will always stand on the side of democracy to defend our Constitution and our freedoms. The aggression, intimidation, and violence is unfathomable and unacceptable. Our thoughts are with the first responders in Washington, D.C., and those who showed heroic actions, many of whom were attacked for protecting those exact foundational rights Americans have. It's a dark time in our country, yet we know better days are ahead. We stand united and resolute in our service to the city and the community, and that is a joint, unified statement from City Council members. Yep. So with that, I'll turn it over to our city manager, who will talk about COVID-19 update.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Dominic Casey, your City Manager. I'm pleased to be here tonight to provide a COVID-19 update. As you know, it's been a pretty eventful last couple days on the COVID-19 front. And so what I'd like to do is maybe just start out with a little bit of what's happening at the federal level. Some of this may be a little bit redundant because you did hear it in our legislative update, but I would like to share it for those maybe who weren't able to attend or listen. Recently, Congress did pass almost $900 billion COVID-19 relief stimulus funding, which will include, it did not include funding for federal and state governments and local governments, but it did include a lot of small business and the PPP, the Paycheck Program addition, and it extended some of the timelines. It also created some criteria for nonprofits to be able to participate where they weren't able to before. And expanded some of the expenses that are going to be allowable for this type of funding. I think that one of the benefits here is we recognize the devastation that's occurred to a lot of our local restaurants and a lot of our local businesses. And this is an effort to help with that recovery as we move forward. A lot of this information, this is obviously a high-level summary. A lot of this information can be found on our city economic development page, as well as the Placer County economic development page, and obviously at the state economic development page. And it's a lot of it's new information, and a lot of the applications are still being uploaded and programs are being uploaded. But I encourage those who are interested and feel that they may be able to apply or would benefit from this to check out those resources. That's what they're there for. On the state level, good news is we do continue to see a reduction in new cases. As you can see there on the slide, it's about 1,000 reduction over the last 2 days, which is positive news. Yesterday in the afternoon, we got an announcement from Governor Newsom that the stay-at-home order for the Sacramento region would be lifted as of January 13th, 2021. This was a surprise to all of us. And after a lot of research last night and this morning, we made sure it was validated, and indeed the stay-at-home order has been lifted. And so I'm going to share what that means a little bit later here on the next slide, but I will say that what that means on a large level is each county within the greater Sacramento region will go back to the tier that their case rate and their positivity rate would set them back at. The state's employed a lot of technical assistance recently to help with the hospitalization and staffing shortages we're seeing, as well as helping get the vaccinations out. This has been a large effort. As you see there, there's been 2,000 medical professionals deployed with an additional 1,000 that we'll see in the days ahead to help with the impact that we're seeing in our not only our local hospitals here, but hospitals across the state. The governor also proposed more than $300 million in the state budget to support distribution for the placement of the vaccine, as well as several $billion to continue to help with the recovery. I think it's important to mention that they have identified a new COVID strain, not only in the United States and abroad, but also here in California, and they're tracing that down. And I mention this to highlight that, but also to share that recently the CDC did come out and say that they believe the current vaccine will protect those who receive it from the new strain of COVID-19. So I think I wanted to highlight that. Early data is showing that the strain may be more contagious, but not necessarily more dangerous. Here locally, as I mentioned, and you can see the numbers, or maybe why we thought it was a bit of a surprise. As you look at our 7-day positivity rate at 13.5, and our 7-day average daily case is 49.7, and these numbers fluctuate almost daily, right? And matter of fact, the numbers today, these are as of yesterday, the numbers today have shifted a little bit. The ICU capacity is actually a little bit greater. I believe it's at 9%, and where there are 4 beds available yesterday, there's 9 beds available today. And that's not uncommon to see that type of fluctuation from day to day. But I do point to the 49.7 case rate per 100,000. As you'll see on when we move to the next slide, the purple tier, this is almost 7 times higher than the purple tier metric. And so I think that as we were really observing this and watching where this was going to go and when the stay-at-home order would be lifted, we were obviously watching our projections and our caseload, and as well as our hospital and ICU capacity. And so trying to compare that to the numbers we have today and the action is still taking a little time to work through that, and it's been a fluid situation, but we continue to make progress on that front. And so I just wanted to mention that, because really what that means is in this purple tier, while I think everybody likes to see the relief for the businesses and some of these activities that now can happen, if something doesn't change with the metric and the tier, it's hard to believe we wouldn't be in purple for a fair amount of time based on these metric numbers. But I do want to share that there are changes, and whereas previously with the stay-at-home order, there were certain sectors which in not only in business, but in some of the worship areas that were impacted, gyms as well as restaurants, and some of those now are allowed to open with modifications. And this can also, I have a website at the end of the presentation that will give much greater detail in what can be in operation and what cannot be. But I think one of the things here are the restaurants that before were takeout and delivery can now go back to outdoor operations under these guidelines, which I know has received a lot of comments and a lot of emails and phone calls from the business community yesterday and this morning. Thankful for that and looking for some assistance with PPEs in different areas. And so we're certainly engaged in that effort and assisting in that. And I tell you, there's a lot of questions right now about the vaccine rollout. I can tell you on all the informational calls that we're on, Placer County is doing very well in the vaccine distribution, not only throughout the state, but also when you compare us federally across the United States. Placer County's allocated over 14,000 of the doses, those first doses. And remember, the first dose is one of two. There's an additional dose that's, I believe, is 21 days later. First dose gives you approximately 50% immunity, and the second dose gives you approximately 90% immunity. Those are both Pfizer and Moderna. And it's really a partnership between the private sector and the public sector. The public vaccines are predominantly right now at the grounds where those are being administered, but Kaiser, Sutter have been working through phase 1A, which is their medical doctors and their care workers, and providing those vaccinations. And they're looking at expanding that and rolling out to their members potentially very soon. And as you can see in the all three tiers of phase 1 are currently in progress. One of the great things that are happening, and this is that I think when you have good coordination, you have agencies working together, both public and private, and at the county level, we're able to take advantage of vaccinations that aren't administered, because once you pull it out and take it, you can't put it back. And we're making sure that we're there and in contact with those folks, and we're able to send some of our firefighters and police officers that were maybe a little lower down the tier to get those as well. And I was made aware of a recent change as well, that those 65 or older are now in phase 1. In those tiers, and so that's a new change. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this is a pretty fluid situation, and so that's a great change. Those who choose to get vaccinated now that are in that bracket are able to do so, and at least from the county level, that can be done by making an appointment at the grounds through their website on the county, Placer County. And as I said, I did want to share this because there's obviously a lot of high-level information on that, but there's a lot of details on all of the items I discussed in the presentation tonight, not only on our website, obviously on our COVID-19 website, which is on a tab right on the front of our homepage, but you can also go to our economic development page for information on all of the PPP and business loans and small business assistance programs I discussed. And then Placer County, their placer.ca.gov has a lot of the details on the numbers, the hospital numbers, and the case rates and the ICU rates, which you're able to track that daily. It's updated Monday through Friday, every day about 4 p.m. And then obviously the state website is where you can track your regions and where the region is. And again, we're in the greater Sacramento region, and you're able to track those numbers. And then they also have a great website and great links to a lot of the federal and state programs out there to help support small business. So with that, I'd turn it back over to the mayor and council. I'll be happy to stand for any questions.
Excellent. Thank you. Do any of the council members have any questions of our city manager?
Yeah, I just have one question. I was sitting in my home office, minding my own business, about noon today, when the headline came across that, as you said, it's a fluid situation, and it changed. So suddenly I went from maybe later this month to now. But my neighbors right before that had asked me how the county is communicating with physicians. So when the LA Times article broke, I called my physician. They hadn't heard from higher up. So I know you're working on getting an answer, but to the extent that folks, we can figure out how the county's communicating to the medical field, that now we're in a new tier. I know I went to their website and they show the in progress and pending, and I went there this morning, but as you said, it's fluid. So, I after educating my provider, I decided I would just go to the ground. So at 1 o'clock on Friday, I'll get my first dose, my first vaccine. So, but if you can, maybe from the county, I don't know if it's Mike Romero or who, find out how they're communicating to providers, that might be helpful for us all.
I can give some of that response.
Okay.
And I'd really, let me break this in two parts. Part one would be Dr. Oldham, our health official for the county, will be at our next meeting and provide a COVID update. And I think that he would be more than happy to talk about the robust discussion between the county and the hospitals. I know they have at least one weekly briefing call because we plug into those as well, and I would suspect there's probably more than that one call, and vaccines are a big part of that discussion. I know right now part of the challenge is they're coming from the federal level to the state level, and when the next large dose is coming has not been targeted. At least we don't have that information if it has been, and I think as soon as that large dose, that second dose coming through, not only the second dose to finish the vaccination, but the next large one for the first part, right, of the vaccination, so they can move further in the phases and tiers. That communication will be shared not only with the hospitals, but with the community, because that will include some folks that aren't public safety or in those circles necessarily. And so there will be more to come on that. There's frequent communication between the county health officers and our docs in the hospitals. And so I think that's the challenge right now, is they don't know when the next large one is coming. But Dr. Oldham would be much more qualified than I to talk about that next week.
Thank you.
Was that all to say that you're getting your vaccine Friday?
Friday, 1 o'clock,
Okay, all right.
the grounds. But
Anyone
I
else
have
have
to
any
keep
questions?
wearing my mask,
Yeah,
face covering.
I think all year. Okay, any other questions of our city manager? Okay, if not, I will open it up to public comment. Now is the time to make any comments on this item. You may call 916-774-5353, or you may email publiccomment@roseville.ca.us. Do we have any calls this evening? Okay, not for this item. I'll give it just a minute. This item is for information only, so we won't be taking any action. And I don't believe we have any calls coming in, so I will close public comment. And we'll move on to item 6, which is public comment. This is the time for anyone to call and make a public comment on any item that is not on the agenda. The number to call in, again, is 916-774-5353, or you may email publiccomment@roseville.ca.us. And I believe we have a call coming through, so we'll put the first one through.
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
Hi, my name is Stephen Veach, and I am a resident of Roseville, California, in the Emerald Creek Stone Ridge neighborhood. My public comment concerns the City of Roseville's marijuana ordinance. Specifically, I would like to respectfully request that the City Council place a local measure on the November 2022 general election ballot that would modify the ordinance to allow marijuana dispensaries and delivery services within the City of Roseville. Roseville was one of many cities throughout California that enacted prohibitions on marijuana businesses following the passage of Proposition 64 in 2016. However, the political conversation surrounding marijuana policy has shifted dramatically since then. Last November, several cities in California approved pro-marijuana ordinances, including localities which had previously banned dispensaries such as Encinitas and San Bruno. Additionally, Roseville's local ordinance prohibiting marijuana delivery was rendered void by a 2019 directive from the Office of Administrative Law, which allowed licensed marijuana delivery services to deliver to any residential address within the state of California. This directive was subsequently upheld in court. Outside of California, the approval of marijuana legalization measures in conservative states like South Dakota demonstrated the broad bipartisan support marijuana reform now enjoys among the American electorate. According to the latest polls from Gallup, 68% of Americans now support legalizing recreational marijuana. Based on both these factors and the critical need for tax revenue due to COVID-19-induced budget shortages, I believe the City Council should allow the people of Roseville to weigh in on the merits of marijuana businesses directly when they next vote for their elected representatives. The current ordinance does not prevent marijuana from entering Roseville and, in my opinion, serves no purpose other than to deprive the city of a vital economic opportunity. I believe that if the people of Roseville are given an opportunity to have their say on this subject, they will agree with my assessment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We can put another call through.
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
Roseville Allies for Justice.
Excuse me?
I said Roseville Allies for Justice.
Okay, what is your name?
Ma'am, we are in an environment where lots of people are getting doxxed and facing literal terrorism. Is it a requirement that I disclose my name before I speak about law enforcement?
No. You may speak now.
Thank you. Calling from Roseville Allies for Justice. In a January 9th, 2021 letter signed by the Roseville City Council, it was stated that, quote, "We will always stand on the side of democracy to defend our Constitution and our freedoms." Since that letter, we've learned that at least a dozen U.S. Capitol Police officers are suspended or under investigation for their involvement in the attack on the U.S. Capitol. We've also learned that nearly 10 law enforcement officers from states across the nation are under investigation by their departments for potential rules violations based on their participation in those riots. The Brennan Center for Justice published a report in August 2020 stating that former FBI agent Mike German detailed law enforcement agencies' longstanding failure to respond to affiliation with white supremacist and militant groups in their ranks, as well as the long history of law enforcement involvement in white supremacist violence. The same memo went on to note that active and retired law enforcement personnel were known to have joined the National Alliance, in some cases holding regional leadership roles in the organization, and it raised concerns that the group's successful efforts to infiltrate law enforcement would likely benefit other white supremacist groups with which it shared intelligence. In 1991, a federal judge ruled in favor of residents of Linwood, describing the Linwood Vikings, a gang within the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, as a, quote, neo-Nazi white supremacist gang that engaged in, quote, terrorist-type attacks with the tacit knowledge and support of departmental leadership. Black law enforcement organizations, along with black senior law enforcement staff across the nation, are seeking reform within law enforcement organizations to counter the lack of fairness and the injustices seen in communities across California and the nation. According to the FBI, the number of hate crimes are at an all-time high in the United States, along with hate-motivated killings. Groups whose ideologies and practices confirm their corroboration with racism, religious bigotry, misogyny, and homophobia, among other hate toward citizens, were confidently displaying white power symbols as they stood around a police car in Placerville over the holidays. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Roseville enact an ordinance that requires the Roseville Police Department to annually compile data on all employees regarding their direct association and family connection with extremists or hate groups as identified by an independent outside firm with experience identifying hate and extremist groups. Therefore, be it further resolved that the resulting counts of these hate group connections be publicly available and reported on an annual basis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have another call coming through.
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
Hello, my name is Teresa Campos, and I live in the Sierra Vista neighborhood of Roseville. And I was calling regarding the, I feel, lack of action on the council's part to denounce racism and violence within our own community, especially after the events at the Capitol that were encouraged by President Trump. The terroristic attack that happened was played out by people similar to the people that live in our communities that are still flying their Trump flags, still showing up to assault women and children at protests in the name of Trump and overturning the election. And I feel it is negligent on behalf of the council to not address the community and to alleviate any fears of people that are not participating in the idea to overthrow the election, as well as addressing the terrorist threats that are happening in the near future. I feel that we, as a community, acted harshly when there was ideas of Black Lives Matter protests showing up here. We shut down our freeways, made statements, and made it very clear that they were not welcome. And we are not doing the same for white supremacists. We are not doing the same for fascists. We are not doing the same for violent Trump supporters that have showed up time after time to cause harm in our own community. And I really encourage the council to do something. And I would like to second the idea to have a committee or an ordinance that requires the Roseville Police Department to annually compile data on their employees regarding the association and family connections with extremists or hate groups. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have at least one more call.
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
Hi, this is Lemuel Viert, and actually I wanted to make comment on the COVID one, but I guess I was in queue for this one, and so if possible, I'd like to make a comment around COVID and get some answers there potentially, and then have a separate public comment. For the COVID one, I'm wondering if there's any possibility of City Council honoring those who died. So specifically, if there's any way of the 161 people in Placer County that we know have died from COVID, to get those names, to possibly do a memorial in our local community, whether it be a park or otherwise, and make sure that we're reaching out to the families of those who died, and whether that local memorial be something of the type of time capsule or a memorial in the park or whatever the case. I think we owe it to those families to do something and set aside dollars there for those families who've lost people, just as we're doing for businesses and otherwise. So I would love to hear something back from that. I don't know if there's the possibility of hearing back from that or not, but that's that piece.
Public comment.
This is public comment, so we're able to listen to your comments. And if you want to address the next item, this would be a great time to do that.
Yeah, they said I was in queue, so I wasn't able to. So then I'll move on to the next topic then. The other topic, actually, I think the speaker before me made mention of, and I'd just like to make it known that the public statement that came out from the city, as well as those that came out from one or two of the city council members, were full of omissions and revisionist language. And the big concern for me actually came from me being contacted by 3 Roseville residents since the statement came out, who are concerned about their personal safety, living here, as well as the safety of their loved ones, because of what they felt Roseville's complicity with the hatred of Trump, the flags waving, as they called it, in the community, and that makes them feel unsafe and wondering if they should be moving out of the city of Roseville. I'm hoping that the city council will take action that actually deals more forcefully with the facts of the matter of that our nation was attacked and our community is one that festers the thinking of those attacks or what led to those attacks, and we have some responsibility there to make our residents feel safe. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we have 2 more calls right now. We'll put one more through.
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
Thank you. My name is Venu Mallesara, a proud Indo-American residing in West Roseville area and volunteer of a non-profit organization, a social and cultural organization called Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh, HSS. First of all, happy year 2021 and welcome all the newly elected council members. HSS greatly appreciates the City Council of Roseville for the extraordinary effort during the difficult COVID times. HSS believes in the concept called Whole World is One Family and has been doing several community activities over the years. Along with the sister organization, we delivered masks to first responders during the early COVID times and also donated food and toiletries to the gathering in Roseville. HSS would like to offer our services to city, community, and civic authorities. Thanks and namaste, Renu Mallesara.
Thank you. Good evening. If you'd state your name now, you may make your comments.
Jagadish Kalwadmat.
Did you just speak, sir?
Yeah. My name is Jagadish Kalwadmat, a proud Hindu-American Roseville resident and volunteer of non-profit social and cultural organization called Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh, HSS. HSS appreciates the excellent work done by the City and Council of Roseville during these difficult times. In January 2021, HSS will conduct an annual Health for Humanity Yogathon to promote healthy lifestyle among the community members. This initiative helps to inculcate sun salutation, a series of yoga postures into daily life routine. Sun salutations, being a simple but complete exercise, has immense health benefits such as boosting energy, immunity in these tough COVID times. And it also builds strength and flexibility while toning the body. And there are many more. We are ready to collaborate and conduct this sun salutation virtually for city, community, and civic authorities. Our volunteers will reach out to city officials. Healthy families, healthy community, health for humanity. Happy New Year 2021, and thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it for our phone calls. Do we have any public comments by email?
We do, Mayor Bernasconi, and I'll be summarizing these because some of them are rather lengthy, but the City Council has received or will receive copies of all of them. Some have come in during the meeting. The first one is from Tucker Salazar, who writes with concerns about Placer County's whole person care program, where the county purchases homes that house formerly homeless people throughout the city. And I will note that a presentation will be coming forward on this in the future when we can allow the public to participate in the city council meetings in person. So that will be an item that will come up for comment. The next item is from Doug Wageman, and he's the owner of Cochran and Wageman Funeral Home. He's asking about expediting the vaccination for funeral service providers who are in close proximity to deceased COVID victims and their families. And they're often known as the last responders, and it's very important to keep them safe. So he's asking if the city can do anything to help with that request. And I'm reading these in chronological order. The next one is an anonymous email about the City Council statement on the U.S. Capitol attack. And the writer takes exception to the items to this council statement and talks about a lot of different points that they're making, and would like the council to focus on things like lifting lockdown orders that the governor has in place. Council has a copy of that email as well. The next one, this might have been our second to the last caller, Venugopal Malasara, and I wasn't sure because I didn't catch his name, but he is with a group called Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh, and it does a lot of community benevolence tasks in the community, delivering masks to first responders and donating food and toiletries to the Gathering Inn, and it would like to offer its services to the city and to the community. And the final one is from Jagadish Kalwadmath, and he called in and he actually read his email into the record on the phone. He was the last caller. And that completes the emailed public comments that we've received.
Thank you very much. If there are no other calls and no other emails, I will close public comment, and I will ask the clerk to read the procedures for approving the consent calendar.
All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine in nature and will be passed by one motion. There will be no discussion of these items unless a member of the City Council, staff, or the public requests a specific item being removed. This evening, I have no request from the City Council to remove an item. Mayor Bernasconi, if you'd inquire if there are any phone calls or emails regarding removing an item from the consent calendar.
Yes, have there been any calls to remove any items? Any phone calls or emails to remove any of the items?
She's on the phone.
Okay. There have been no phone calls or emails to remove any items.
So may I have a motion to approve the consent calendar as recommended?
So moved.
Second.
Vice Mayor Haddashelt.
Yes.
Councilmember Alvord.
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci.
Yes.
Councilmember Mendoza.
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi.
Yes, thank you. We will move right into item 8.1. Roseville Community Development Corporation Annual Corporate Update, reappointment of director and direction to wind up and dissolve.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Mike Isom, your Development Services Director, but I'm speaking to you tonight specifically in my capacity as the Chief Executive Officer of the Roseville Community Development Corporation, or RCDC. And I'm here to provide an annual update concerning the RCDC's activities over the past year, along with our budget and audited financial statements. And this is required by our bylaws, our corporate bylaws, as well as our operating agreement with the city. I beg your indulgence. The presentation is about 15 minutes long, but I have a lot of material to cover. So thank you for your patience in advance. But we'll begin by talking about, I wanted to provide some historical overview of the RCDC, why it was formed, some of its history. We'll talk about its background and focus on the successes of the corporation over the last 10 years. Talk about this year's work program, along with the activities that we have planned for this year, which isn't much, as you'll find out. We'll talk about the fiscal status, both our budget for the current fiscal year, along with last fiscal year's audited financial statements. We'll discuss the corporation's outstanding loan liabilities, both of the city and successor agency, as it relates to available resources. And then that'll all lead to a discussion at the end about staff's recommendation that the council direct the board and staff to begin the dissolution process of the corporation. So just by way of background, the RCDC is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. It's in its 10th year of existence. It was established by the city in 2011, and the city is the sole member of the corporation. Its mission statement is to focus on physical, economic, and educational development throughout the community, creating expanded employment, economic prosperity, and housing opportunities for all. And it was really a forward-thinking move on the council's part back in 2011. The demise of redevelopment agencies were on the horizon. We saw that coming, and the city was looking for another mechanism to advance the revitalization efforts in the downtown. The RCDC was founded with a $5 million startup loan from the city via the redevelopment agency that was subsequently augmented with a $900,000 grant. It was established on the presence that its ongoing operating expenses would be financed in part by some form of tax increment following the dissolution of redevelopment agencies. And as we all know, tax increment was stripped away as a viable source of revenue for revitalization activities, and I'll get to that more in a minute. So next slide, please. So since its startup nearly 10 years ago, the RCDC has enjoyed numerous successes. I've put some of the highlights on the screen. It was directly responsible for acquiring 3 commercial properties on the 200 block of Vernon, as well as the Oddfellows building at 110 Pacific, and renovating them, refurbishing them, putting tenants in them, and then eventually returning them back to private ownership. And those buildings were acquired primarily to preempt warehouse uses and other types of uses on Vernon Street that wouldn't contribute to the revitalization of downtown. So that was a success in that respect. The RCDC residential rehab program rehabilitated 3 distressed homes in 3 separate neighborhoods. These rehabs had positive lasting impacts to the neighborhoods that they were performed in, and they also generated significant investment in the homes around them. So the neighborhoods that experienced that rehabilitation were grateful for that investment. The RCDC's investment on Vernon Street resulted in a 76% increase in property tax on the 200 block of Vernon alone. So I didn't pull the tax bills for the entire street, just the 200 block, but we saw a 76% increase there since 2012. And during that same time frame, the investment contributed to a 30% increase in sales tax on Vernon Street, which directly flows to the city. The RCDC's efforts had a significant influence in raising rents in the downtown. Sometimes we saw a 3-fold increase, and that's important because that's necessary to convince private ownership to invest and rehabilitate the buildings down here. They need to be able to make a profit. Since its inception, the RCDC has reimbursed the city in excess of $900,000 for staff and operational costs. It has generated many earned media spots, attracting attention and bringing recognition to the downtown. It was instrumental in the funding and the startup of the downtown property business, or Roseville Property and Business Improvement District, the PBID. This is known as the Downtown Roseville Partnership, and it has been successful in providing maintenance, day porter services, and its continuing events such as Downtown Tuesday Nights and the Holiday Parade. And lastly, and I think most importantly, the RCDC was responsible for creation and administration of the public-private partnership known as Advantage Roseville, which was a business attraction and retention effort. Since its inception, Advantage Roseville has directly contributed to capital investment commitments for new construction and payroll totaling over $1 billion, and has assisted in the recruitment of over 6,300 jobs to Roseville. The program also sponsored nearly 2,500 hours of small business training at no cost to participants. Laura's not here tonight, but I did want to call out Laura Mattioli. It was her tireless efforts with the Advantage Roseville program that made it the success that it is. Tireless efforts, and the successes that are on the screen are really attributable to my CEO predecessors, John Sprague and Chris Robles, so I did want to recognize them as well. All told, these successes have contributed in excess of $1.2 million in direct financial return to the city, along with incalculable benefits to the citywide economy resulting from additional payroll, capital investments, and such. So in February 2018, as some of you are aware, the Council and RCDC Board held a joint workshop to discuss the future course of the corporation. And at that meeting, the Council directed staff and the Board to conduct the actions necessary to pursue what they called a strategic pause in activities. And so at that time, the corporation was directed to resolve all of its liabilities and liquidate its assets in order to provide a cash payout to the city as soon as reasonably possible. So since then, our work program has consisted of nothing more than that. So we've been selling properties and doing the things necessary to liquidate assets, which we've done. And I'll get into that in a minute. So just for context, in 2018, we sold the 242 to 246 Vernon building, which is Nella's and the salon on the corner, the Monks building, which is 240 Vernon, and then just in February of 2020, a month before the COVID lockdowns occurred, we sold the 238 Vernon, which was formerly Ninja's. Up until this past November, the Oddfellows building at 110 Pacific has been a perpetual challenge for us. As you know, for the past several years, 110 Pacific has been the subject of litigation filed by a neighboring property owner in both state and federal courts under various causes of action. Those suits were ultimately dismissed in 2019, but that delay caused by the court actions came at considerable financial cost to the corporation. Most notably, it scuttled an imminent purchase agreement with a notable brewery back in late 2017, early 2018, in addition to pretty considerable legal defense fees. It also delayed our ability to complete property liquidation as directed and it put on hold for almost 3 years our ability to begin the dissolution process. So basically what that means is we had to incur another 2 years or more than 2 years in operational costs that we hadn't planned on. So as a direct result, the corporation is not in as strong a cash position as we had projected when the council told us to pursue the strategic pause. And unfortunately, as an unfortunate consequence, the corporation's liabilities to both the city and successor agency exceed available resources. So very briefly on our budget, next slide please, thank you. At this point, our only source of revenue is from interest earnings of cash in the bank and gains on property sales. So back in June, we assumed just under $29,000 in revenues, which also included an estimated marginal gain on the sale of 110 Pacific. In reality, we didn't experience a gain on that sale, so our revenues are less. Let's see, on the expense side, the budget assumes just under $73,000 in basic operating expenses. Most of this is the accrued deferred interest, which I'll get into on the loans, but we have contract staff costs, legal costs, the audit, property taxes, and so on. So as you can see, we're upside down by the tune of just under $160,000 this year. Our available cash resources as of November 30th were hovering right around $3 million. So consistent also with the RCDC bylaws and the operating agreement, the corporation is subject to annual financial audit. The audit was performed by the firm Eide Bailey, which performed its fieldwork and testing for the fiscal year ending June 30th, the week of August 17th. The financial statements were ultimately issued a clean opinion, but due to the corporation's decision to pursue a strategic pause and liquidate assets, the auditors raised substantial doubt about the corporation's ability to continue as a going concern within the next 12 months. This was not unexpected because we've already sold our revenue-producing properties. We have no viable source of income, so that was not unexpected. The board of directors took action to approve the audited financial statements at a special meeting on November 18th. So what you're looking at now is a summary of our outstanding debt obligations. And as I mentioned earlier, we were founded, or the corporation was founded, with a $5 million startup loan via the former RDA. So what ultimately happened is that the city had only dispersed about $3.5 million of that $5 million at the time redevelopment agencies were dissolved. They were shuttered, so that essentially turned off the spigot, the flow of funding. So it cut off the ability to disperse further RDA funds, and that $3.5 million then became an enforceable obligation of the former redevelopment agency, and it was put on the recognized obligation payment schedule, or the ROPS. So it's overseen now by the successor agency. So that's to fill the gap. The city then directly loaned $1.5 million to the RCDC to get back to the $5 million. So that's the reason that we have two loans. I just wanted to take a couple minutes to explain that because I get asked that question pretty frequently. Both loans have identical terms. They're 10-year loans, or 20-year loans at variable interest with scheduled resets. So right now we're at 2.288. It's essentially the city's average earnings, interest earnings plus 1%. There are no payments for the first 10 years, so our first principal payment is scheduled in 2023. And assuming that the loans were taken to full term, the 20-year term, the total obligation, including interest, is $6,550,700. Next slide. Thank you. Here's a snapshot of the assets versus liabilities. Again, as of November 30th, we have a total to date. So we have the principal balances of Loan 1 and Loan 2, the City of Roseville and successor agency, and the accrued interest is the interest accrued to date. So we have a total loan liability of just under $5.9 million. As I mentioned, we have approximately $3 million. It's a little bit less than that now because we had some bills in December. But that leaves us with a shortfall of just under $2.9 million. So just to kind of sum it all up, the RCDC has demonstrated success in commercial and residential real estate, business and job recruitment. It has supported small businesses with training opportunities. It's garnered media attention to the city's economic development platform, and it was an active participant in the revitalization of the downtown. And again, to date, the RCDC's efforts have generated over $1.2 million in direct financial return to the city. in the form of sales and property tax and staff cost reimbursement. And again, that doesn't factor the intangible or the indirect, I should say, growth resulting from payroll growth and capital investment elsewhere in the city. The direct financial benefit of the RCDC's other accomplishments is not easily quantified, but needless to say, their indirect benefits will have a long and lasting impact on the community. And as I mentioned also earlier, just to drive this point home, our financial structure was originally designed in anticipation of having access to some form of tax increment financing. That's not available to us anymore, so as a result, we were forced to rely solely on our real estate income, which was rent, to sustain long-term operations, and as we found, that is just not sustainable. As I also described earlier, all revenue-producing properties at this point have been sold consistent with council direction. So that leaves us in the position of having no income stream while our expenses continue to accrue at a rate of about $10,000 to $15,000 per month. And again, that's primarily the deferred interest that continues to accrue. So without a reliable and renewable source of income, this negative financial position can't improve absent a significant cash infusion, bankruptcy, or dissolution, which is what we're here to recommend tonight. So as I mentioned earlier, there are insufficient cash resources to retire the principal of both loans along with the accrued interest. We've done some preliminary research, and while we can ask for a prorated amount, the state will likely require that all available resources be directed to first satisfy the successor agency loan. So if that is indeed the case, there wouldn't be any remaining assets to repay the city loan. However, as I've detailed, the RCDC's financial return to the city and ongoing benefits linked to job creation and the citywide economy is projected to exceed the value of the loan over time, resulting in a positive fiscal impact. So by all accounts, the RCDC has created jobs, it has improved the local economy, fulfilling the underlying purposes for its creation. So now that the remaining properties have been sold and the final assets are known, staff on the board are seeking direction from the council to begin the process to wind up and dissolve the corporation. So just to summarize the next steps, if the council provides us direction, the council would adopt a resolution tonight. We would arrange for payment or forgiveness of the debts, and the debts at this point, again, are primarily the city and the successor agency. We would pursue the waiver of objections with the Attorney General, the State Attorney General, send notices. We would wind up the business, pay off the liabilities, and the other steps noted on the screen. Lastly, we'd have to file a certificate of dissolution with the Secretary of State, deal again with the AG's office, and then file our final tax return. So those would be the steps that will follow, provided the council provides that direction this evening. So with that, our recommendation this evening is that the council receive the annual report regarding the RCDC's fiscal status, audited financial statements, and fiscal year budget. And while I didn't discuss it in the presentation, I do need you to take action to reappoint Howard Rudd to the board of directors. His term expires in February. I still need a quorum on the board in order to take the actions necessary to wind up. Also asking you to adopt a resolution directing the board of directors to initiate winding up and dissolution of the RCDC. And lastly, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager and his designees to take all actions necessary to assist in the disposition process and all actions necessary for disposition of the city's loan. So that was a lot of information. Thank you for your patience. I'm available to answer your questions.
Great, thank you. Where should we start? Does anyone have any burning questions they'd like to start us off with?
No.
No. Well, one question.
There was a mention in there about the revenue-generating properties have been sold. I just wanted to ask, is there any other properties that might not have been revenue-generating?
The only other property that we owned was the parking lot on Jefferson Street, and a year or two ago, we deeded that property over to the city in exchange for a reduction in the principal loan balance on the city's loan. So it wasn't revenue producing, but there was financial benefit from it, and the city gained that property for additional public parking.
Got it. Just wanted to make sure that understood the wording. No other questions, just comments later.
Okay, I don't think we have any comments. Thank you for your report and your work on all this time, too.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we need a motion?
No, we need to have public comment.
Sorry. Okay, I will open it up to public comment. Is there anyone on the phone or any emails received? Okay, we will close public comment. And we will ask for a motion.
Sorry, I had a comment. Is that
Oh,
right?
okay.
I do apologize. I just wanted to mention that I owned a restaurant downtown, and I was part of the revitalization committee of the cities back when this was happening. And I was very, very impressed with the staff that you mentioned and the city council at that time for forming this. It really saved our downtown. I remember the process. You were talking about a couple of our key buildings literally becoming storage facilities and warehouses, and that would have just ruined it. And it was so uplifting. Not only there's so many intangible dollars that things that happened to our downtown, but one of the big ones is it showed all the business owners downtown and future business owners that the city really bought into making this a great downtown. They designed this organization to try to help save it. They watched the city invest in the PBID down here, and I really want to thank the past council members and the staff that have kept this going, because you really, really did save downtown because of this process. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
I have one, Mayor. I think RCDC did quite a bit in its inception, and that was the time when we had a redevelopment agency, and then life as we knew it changed. But at that time, just as Councilmember Albert has mentioned, there were some very positive things, and I would also I remember Advantage Roseville being started, and a lot of the businesses getting together to how they could promote Roseville, but they started because of RCDC and the staff that was there. Now, I think they've done what they could do, and it's time to, do something a little bit different. And their time that was here made a difference, and but the economy and things have changed, and we need to go forward.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, I think we're ready.
The proposed motion is to receive the final report on the RCDC, to adopt Resolution 21-004, authorizing the city manager or his designee to take all actions necessary to assist in the Roseville Community Development Corporation dissolution process and all actions necessary for the disposition of the city's loan, and to adopt Resolution number 21-005, resolution to wind up and dissolve resolution of the sole member of Roseville Community Development Corporation Incorporated, a California nonprofit corporation, and to reappoint Director Howard Rudd to the RCDC Board of Directors for a term to expire February 2024 or upon dissolution of the corporation, whichever occurs first. May I have a motion?
So moved. Did you make the motion, Bruce? Or Scott? I'll second.
Vice Mayor Haddashelt.
Yes.
Councilmember Alvord.
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci.
Yes.
Councilmember Bendanza.
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi.
Yes. Thank you. We'll move on to item 8.2, Central Park Phase 3 Project Notice of Completion.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi and council members. I'm Tara G., your Park Planning and Development Superintendent. I'm pleased to be here tonight to present to you the final steps of the completion of 2 citywide parks. So this will include items 8.2 for Central Park and 8.3 for Crab Park. As a matter of background, both parks are citywide parks. They're typically, citywide parks are typically built in phases. Both parks are about 20 acres in size. Both parks had previous phases of construction that equaled about 7 acres of development, and this was prior to 2016. Also, both parks for maintenance are funded through the general fund. For a number of years, the neighbors near both parks requested that the city complete the final phases of these. So for those who are unfamiliar with the locations of these parks, Central Park is located off in the Highland Reserve North area, that is on the other side of 65, off of Fairway and Highland Park Drive. It is also located in the middle of the Nugget, or in between the Nugget Market area, as well as Thomas Jefferson Elementary School. For Harry Crabb Park, it is located in the Stone Ridge area off of Secret Ravine and Scarborough. A little bit more about the history of this. Central Park, we identified a phase of construction for Central Park, which was bid in 2016. At that time, we received some reasonable bids, and so we were looking at awarding another phase of that contract. Concurrently, we were also looking at building another phase of Harry Crabb Park. This park was bid twice. The first bid, or the first attempt to bid and construct the park, we received no bidders. The second attempt, after repackaging it a little bit, we received some reasonable bids. And again, both of them were concurrent with one another. It was at this time that concerns regarding the health of the general fund surfaced. Prior to the award of any park project, consideration of funding for the support of maintenance needed to be reviewed and considered. Since these parks, both of them, required general fund support for maintenance, both projects were put on hold. It was our hope that within the 2016 and the statute of limitation of receiving bids that we could find some solutions. However, we ended up rejecting all bids for both projects in early 2017. So public outreach, we did a lot. To say the least. Public outreach started with some letter updates on the construction. On the top picture there, you'll see that we had provided some updates as soon as we were able to explain the situation about the general fund. We also met with the neighbors face-to-face when we were able to do face-to-face meetings, and also explained to both neighborhoods, the Highland Reserve neighborhood as well as the Stone Ridge neighborhood, about the concerns of the general fund, and discussed various options that we might have to research. We also did a resident survey in the Highland Reserve North area where we asked the residents their interest in potentially self-assessing to support the maintenance of the park. And this was, again, in Highland Reserve North, it was about Central Park. Unfortunately, the results of the survey were not favorable of taking that route. We continue to do other public outreach, which also included ongoing communications with the residents in both areas of the city, routine meetings, and attendance at neighborhood association meetings, emails, both individually as well as group emails in both neighborhoods. We were also able to provide updates in the Stone Ridge Neighborhood Association newsletters, and we've had multiple on-site meetings with residents before and during construction. As you know, in 2017, the city kicked off a citywide initiative called Engage Roseville, where a city-appointed committee was tasked to help prioritize city services. And through the numerous feedback tools that were employed by the city, both Harry Crabb Park and Central Parks were mentioned as high priority to the residents. In November of 2019, Measure B passed, and Measure B was placed on the ballot and was passed by the voters. This provided a half-cent sales tax to help fund public safety and essential services. This included the maintenance of these parks. Additionally, with the passage of Measure B, rather than constructing a phase of each park, it was decided to complete these parks. Work began to accelerate the full construction of both parks. So what did we build? Central Park. We built 2 lighted softball fields, 2 tennis courts, basketball courts, children's swing area, shaded picnic area, a restroom. We added lights to the existing soccer fields, and we built an off-street parking lot area that accommodated about 73 spaces. We also added some on-street parking as well off of Highland Park Drive. 2 previous phases of development at Central Park included the Mike Shalato indoor pool, which I don't know if you all knew, that is actually part of Central Park. We also built a mini splash pad, and we built 2 soccer fields. 2 half courts for basketball were built in a previous phase, as well as the children's play area, and key pathways connecting the shopping area through the park to the elementary school were also previously built. Additionally, this was planned to be a 2-season construction project, breaking ground earlier this year. However, with the diligent work of our project manager, Joel DeYoung, and our contract partner, Abide Construction, the park was completed in 1 year. Here's a picture of some of the finished work. To the left of your screen is the softball fields, and to the right of it is some landscaping and finished work, also in the outfield of the softball fields. Now for Harry Crabb Park. What did we build there? We built 2, it took 2 construction seasons, so we actually broke ground last year, and we are now finishing up now. We built 2 ball fields, 2 bocce ball courts, a soccer field, 2 tennis courts, 2 pickleball courts, a water play feature, a full-size basketball court, a restroom, another shaded picnic area. We enlarged the off-street parking lot to 72 spaces. Previously, it was about 12. And we restriped Scarborough Drive to accommodate 50 additional parking spaces. These improvements are in addition to the existing park amenities, which included a 4-court sand volleyball court, 2 horseshoe courts, a children's play area, shaded picnic area, and open turf. And here are some pictures with regards to the baseball fields and the bocce ball court. I wanted to note as well that there's 2 items in progress that you will see happening once the fences come down. And that is a fence at the basketball court, as well as windscreens at the tennis and pickleball courts. We had, these are outside of the current contract and outside of the action that we're asking of you tonight. And there was a slight delay because of COVID. Okay, so why is the grass brown? I wanted to bring this up to you because you may be asked this question. At this point in time, the grass is turning brown because we have used a hybrid Bermuda type of grass, and that is specific to the sports fields. This is a warm season grass, so in the wintertime, because it's cold, it goes dormant. Rest assured, in the spring, it'll turn green again. And I wanted to also distinguish that this hybrid Bermuda is not the typical Bermuda you see, the weed type that people struggle with in their gardens and planters. This is a very specific type of grass seed that is been used here, as well as I'll mention Pistachio Park. So why Bermuda? It's an excellent sports turf and playing surface and is preferred by our sports groups. By having high-end playing surfaces, we can attract more amateur competitive sports, tournaments, and events, which is great for the local economy. It also self-repairs, which means that based on heavy use, it minimizes field closures and the need to repair bare spots. It also uses less water and is more drought and heat tolerant. I also wanted to make sure to point out that this, again, is used for the sports fields only, that other areas that are not associated with a field is a traditional grass, and so you'll see that stay green year-round. So, pending council approval of our recommendation tonight, The fences for Central Park are targeted to be taken down around January 18th. For Harry Crab Park, the fences are scheduled to be removed around January 15th. So January 15th is right before this weekend, and the 18th is right after this weekend. Certainly, it's been a journey regarding these two parks. It's one thing to travel this path with one major citywide park, and even more so when there are two concurrent in its size and complexity. This is in addition to the regular workload. I want to acknowledge the entire park development team who stayed diligent, flexible, worked through many iterations of the plans, and worked with our contractors in order to complete the work. I'm pleased to be here tonight to seek approval from the council on two separate items. One related to item 8.2, to accept this Central Park as complete and authorize the city manager to execute the notice of completion, and related to item 8.3, to do the same for Harry Crab Park. This concludes my presentation, and I'm ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Does the council have any questions of Tara? I want to start with Councilmember
Public
Rakucci.
comments? Do you want to comment? I don't have a question.
Yeah, I have a comment.
Comment?
No, I'm so pleased to see the completion of the parks. They're in two different areas in Roseville. And, they were in different phases, but one thing you not failed to mention, but it was during a downed economy, Now we have COVID, we have a downed economy, but this one was, was an economic recession. And to be able to come back and also have the community support to have Measure B. So it made a world of difference so that we can continue. So it was great. Tara, remind me, are we like in the 70s? How many parks do we have? I know these are the regional parks, but how many altogether?
With the two that we just finished this year, we're at 78.
Okay, 78. Not very many cities can do that. And it just, I've lived in Roseville all my life, and my children, and when I was a kid, there was Royer Park, and then even Cresthaven. And so to see all these parks, and it's so neat. My grandchildren are getting to use and see other kids, and also big kids like me. We all walk around and just enjoy seeing the different colors, the people, being happy and being outside. So thank you for all the work you've done.
Thank you.
I just had a comment. I had the opportunity over this last weekend to go out to Harry Crab Park. My daughter's an avid volleyball player and on a team here locally. And I'm impressed with all of our parks. Let me put that statement out there. But I was really impressed with the work at Harry Crab Park. And what was nice was none of the fencing or the way the construction impact was didn't impact access to the trail that's adjacent to that, which is used by many of our residents. But just kind of peeking around and seeing what was done on this particular park, it was just really phenomenal. And given the timeline that you brought forth today, as far as the challenges and how quickly this all kind of came together, even though it didn't seem like it was quick, but I just think it's phenomenal that we can do this kind of stuff with our parks, and that we can get these things out to bid and get these things built and get them back online for our residents. So, kudos to you and your team and making that happen, and our partners out there who worked with us, our construction partners. But I was really taken back, because sometimes you just, you don't think it's going to be that great. It's like, okay, it's a completed project. But I was really, really impressed with what we did at that park, and I'm sure Central Park is equally as phenomenal. But I just wanted to comment that I like what we did with Harry Crab, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember or Vice Mayor Hadashout, do you have any comments?
A couple of questions. So there's a warranty period for everything, like about a year, right?
Right.
We're filing notice to complete, but if the grass never turns the color it's supposed to turn, that'll happen, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then you mentioned that in Central Park, you were able to get 2 seasons into one. Was there any savings that the city was able to incur, or did the community out there take all that savings up?
Well, actually, because it's originally budgeted as a 2-season construction project, there were dollars that were set aside for winterization. And so the savings was that we didn't have to use those dollars to have winterization, but instead of doing that, and in order to open up the park sooner, we put those dollars into sodding the ball fields. And so that's why, that was another reason why we were able to open up in a year, is because of the sod. So we felt that it was money well worth it to accelerate the completion of the project and get that seed and sod, instead of seeding, sodding, and be done.
And then if I might make just a few comments, this was really my onboarding experience. Both Central Park, Harry Crabb Park, and Boljon Park. And it gave me an opportunity to understand the proactive and pragmatic initiative that our staff has. Our assistant city manager, our Parks and Rec director, and Tara and I met at Harry Crabb Park, and there was some concern. And I think the only realistic answer you can give people is, we'll listen, we'll come back with some suggestions. We can guarantee you we're not going to be able to do 100% of what you're asking. Some folks wanted the crab moved, and that wasn't going to happen. But it was just a wonderful, wonderful insight into our staff and how they listen and how proactive they are and how they come to that collaborative and compromise solution that addresses concerns. So I think, at Central Park we had an awful lot of boulders, right? Mm-hmm. And the parents were concerned about their kids walking to school, and then the aesthetics of that. And we found we could use, I'll look at Rich, we found we could use them at our wastewater treatment plant. So, thank you, staff, for always being open and thoughtful and, not over-promising, but promising that you'll try to do something. So that's really great. And while I'm on it, the neighbors at Boljon Park, we're not happy with the playground equipment change. We've had some conversations about that, and there's this wonderful public-private partnership that's coming together around that, where the community, had their first fundraiser to, raise money to get the playground equipment back. And so it really is, I love our parks, I love our trails. Bury me on one of them when my time is over. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Councilmember Alvord?
Most of what I was thinking has been said. Just really, we're representatives of the community. The community really wanted to get these things finished, and so congratulations. I know the community is excited about it, so thank you for accelerating it. And community, thank you for passing Measure B. That's what did it in the first place. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you. All right, I echo those same sentiments as my colleagues. I think it's important that in addition to these two citywide parks that we have on our agenda tonight, I feel like our agenda is always packed full with items regarding our parks, and tonight is no exception. People move here because of our parks and our quality of life. So we also took a vote on, Maidu soccer fields, the renovation projects that are underway there, and the partnerships that we have with the soccer clubs. And then also the completion of another park out in the west part of town, the John L. Sullivan Park, notice of completion. So great job to you and all of your team to help make this happen. Thank you. So I think that we have made all of our council comments, and I will open it up to public comment. For anyone who wishes to comment on this item, you're invited to call in at 916-774-5353, or you may email at publiccomment@roseville.ca.us. I know we do have a little bit of a delay, but I'm not seeing that we have anybody who has called or commented in.
And to be clear, it's items 8.2 and 8.3.
Okay, we'll do them both? Okay. Okay, so that would be the Central Park and the Harry Crab Park. So I don't believe that we have any public comments, so we'll ask our clerk to read us a motion.
We'll have to make separate motions for each park. So the first motion would be to adopt resolution number 21-001, accepting the public work known as the Central Park Phase 3 project, approving the notice of completion, and authorizing the Parks, Recreation, and Libraries Director to execute said notice on behalf of the City of Roseville. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Vice Mayor Haddashelt?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvord?
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci? Yes. Councilmember Mendoza?
Yes.
Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes.
The second motion is to adopt resolution number 21-002, accepting the public work known as the Harry Crab Park Phase 2 project, approving the notice of completion, and authorizing the Parks, Recreation, and Libraries Director to execute said notice on behalf of the City of Roseville. May I have a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Mayor Haddashelt?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvord? Yes. Councilmember Rakucci?
Yes.
Councilmember Mendoza?
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes. Thank you. And thank you to the council for their comments as well. Okay, we will move into item 9.1, board and commissions biannual vacancies, and I would imagine our clerk will walk us through this process.
That's correct. Mayor Bernasconi and members of the council, this evening, the council will be asked to appoint members to our 6 board and commissions that have vacancies. The first Board of Commission would be the Board of Appeals, and for the public's ability to see who the applicants are, they're shown on the board. At this point, following public comment, you can comment on all the items at one time. I'll ask you to vote your ballots. So if you'll open it up for public comment prior to the voting.
Thank you. I'll open it up to public comment. Anyone who wishes to address this item may call in at 916-774-5353, or they may email in at publiccomment@roseville.ca.us.
No public comment. I'd ask that the council vote for the Board of Appeals on their green ballot. We'll be appointing 5 members with terms expiring 12/31 of 2024. Mayor Krista Bernasconi nominates Pete Constant, Deanna Erdman, Bruce Hagler, Andrus Seminar, and Brian Stinklift. Councilmember Tracy Mendoza nominates Pete Constant, Jason Douglas, Deanna Erdman, Bruce Hagler, and Brian Stinklift. Councilmember Pauline Rakucci nominates Pete Constant, Bruce Hagler, Debbie Leong, Andrus Seminar, and Brian Stinklift. Vice Mayor Bruce Haddashelt nominates Pete Constant, Deanna Erdman, Bruce Hagler, Stephanie Nunez, and Brian Stinklift. And Councilmember Scott Alvord nominates Jason Douglas, Bruce Hagler, Debbie Leong, Andrus Seminar, and Brian Stinklift. So currently, Pete Constant received 4 votes, Jason Douglas 2 votes, Deanna 3 votes, Bruce Hagler 5 votes, Debbie Leong 2, Stephanie Nunez 1, Andrea Seminar 3, and Brian Stinkleff 5. So we have Pete Constant, Deanna Erdman, Bruce Hagler, Andrea Seminar, and Brian Stinkleff. Can I have a motion to appoint those 5 to the Board of Appeals?
Second.
Member Haddishelt?
Yes.
Councilmember Albert? Councilmember Rakucci? Yes. Councilmember Mendoza?
Yep.
And Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes.
Okay, the next ballot before you is the Library Board. We'll be appointing 2 members with terms expiring 12/31 of 2004.
Sorry.
Councilmember Tracy Mendoza nominates Laxmio Rowe and Kayla Scott. Councilmember Pauline Rakucci, Laxmo Rowe, and Kayla Scott. Councilmember Scott Albert, Neil Popel, Laxmo Rowe. Mayor Krista Bernasconi, Laxmo Rowe, and Kayla Scott. And Vice Mayor Bruce Haddishelt, Laxmo Rowe, and Kayla Scott. So may I have a motion to appoint Laxmo Rowe and Kayla Scott to the Library Board?
So moved.
Second.
Vice Mayor Haddishelt?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvord?
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci?
Yes.
Councilmember Mendoza?
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes.
So the next request is to appoint 4 members to the Parks and Recreation Commission. Councilmember Scott Albert nominates Nick Alexander, Matthew Bridge, Mike Esparza, and Neil Popel. Councilmember Pauline Rakucci nominates Nick Alexander, Matthew Bridge, Sandra Pollock Cushing, and Mike Esparza. Councilmember Tracy Mendoza, Nick Alexander, Matthew Bridge, Mike Esparza, and Richard Otis.
Ortiz.
Ortiz, excuse me. Mayor Bernasconi nominates Nick Alexander, Matthew Bridge, Sandra Pollock Cushing, and Mike Esparza. And Vice Mayor Bruce Haddishelt, Matthew Bridge, Mike Esparza, Neva Marie Parker, and John Rector. So we've nominated 3 members, which would be Nick Alexander, Matthew Bridge, and Mike Esparza. So I'm going to pass another ballot to you. We need to appoint another member because no other member received a majority of 3 votes. So if you would pass that down and take your ballot. choose one member. Councilmember Tracy Mendoza, Richard Ortiz. Councilmember Pauline Rakucci, Sandra Pollock Cushing. Councilmember Scott Alvord, Sandra Pollock Cushing. Mayor Krista Bernasconi, Sandra Pollock Cushing. And Vice Mayor Hadeshelt Renee Irwin. So we've received the majority of votes for Sandra Pollock Cushing. So we'll appoint Nick Alexander, Matthew Bridge, Mike Esparza, and Sandra Pollock Cushing to the Parks and Recreation Commission. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Vice Mayor Hadeshelt?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvord?
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci?
Yes.
Councilmember Mendoza?
Yep.
And Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes.
The next ballot that I request that you vote is for the Personnel Board. We need to appoint 3 members to the Personnel Board with terms expiring in 2024. Councilmember Scott Alvord nominates Basil Deem, Herbert Long, and Charles Sandoval. Councilmember Pauline Rakucci, Herbert Long, Stephanie Nunez, and Charles Sandoval. Councilmember Tracy Mendoza, Robert Brittany, Herbert Long, and Charles Sandoval. Vice Mayor Hadeshelt, Herbert Long, Stephanie Nunez, and Charles Sandoval. And Mayor Bernasconi, Robert Brittany, Herbert Long, and Charles Sandoval. So we have 2 of the 3, which would be Herbert Long and Charles Sandoval. I'm going to pass you a ballot. Vote for 1. Councilmember Tracy Mendoza nominates Robert Brittany. Councilmember Pauline Rakucci, Robert Brittany. Mayor Bernasconi, Robert Brittany. Vice Mayor Haddashelt, Stephanie Nunez, and Councilmember Robert Brittany. So may I have a motion to appoint Herbert Long Sr., Charles Sandoval, and Robert Brittany to the Personnel Board?
So moved.
Second.
Haddashelt? Yes. Councilmember Albert? Yes. Councilmember Rakucci?
Yes.
Councilmember Mendoza?
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes.
The next vote before you is for the Senior Commission. There are actually only 4 applicants on the Senior Commission for 4 seats. So at this point, if you don't desire a vote, we can just make a motion to appoint those 4 individuals to the Senior Commission.
Yes, it works for me.
That'd be fine.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, so may I have a motion?
You want me to move?
Yes, please.
Move to appoint Renee Ambrosi, Kathleen Crawford, Bobby Knapp, and Brian Perry to the Senior Commission.
Second.
Vice Mayor Haddashelt? Yes. Councilmember Albert?
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci? Yes. Councilmember Mendoza?
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes.
And the last and final vote before you this evening is for the Transportation Commission. Please vote your ballot for 3 members with terms expiring in 2024. Councilmember Tracy Mendoza nominates Kenneth Eisenhower, Nicholas O'Neill, and Jason Probst. Councilmember Pauline Rakucci, Audrey Husking, Kenneth Eisenhower, and Jason Probst. Mayor Bernasconi, Audrey Husking, Kenneth Eisenhower, and Jason Probst. Vice Mayor Haddashelt, Kenneth Eisenhower, Derek Pell, and Jason Probst. Councilmember Scott Alvord nominates Jason Douglas, Audrey Husking, and Jason Probst. So the members to appoint to the Transportation Commission, Audrey Husking, Kenneth Eisenhower, and Jason Probst. May I have a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Vice Mayor Haddashelt?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvord?
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci? Councilmember Mendoza?
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all those who applied as well. Okay. I think we have a department update this evening from our Environmental Utilities Department. We have Mr. Richard Plecker.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi and members of the City Council. I'm Rich Plecker. I'm your EU Director. I'm going to try my best to get along with the mask here tonight, but I'm been told that I mumble a little bit in my speech anyways, and if I feel like I'm mumbling, I might just take it off. Anyways, the purpose of tonight is to kind of fill you in on what we've been up to the last year or so and maybe what we're doing in the next year. I've been asked to go quickly by my colleagues who seem to be interested in eating tonight, but I want to make sure that there's plenty of time left towards the end if you have any questions. So with that, we'll get going. EU, like any other organization, is kind of guided by overall goals. And our goals bear striking resemblance to the City Council's goals, in fact. Our 5 goals that we operate to are delivering community value, optimizing financial stewardship, providing reliable and efficient services, investing in our resources, and maintaining a safe and healthy environment. Kind of common sense sorts of things, but they really are what drives us. On the next slide, we'll start talking about some of the things that you might want a Trivial Pursuit game with here in Roseville. That's about our various utilities. In the water side of the utility, most of you know that we operate a 100 million gallon per day drinking water plant on Barton Road in Granite Bay. We have 6 currently active groundwater wells, about 600 miles of pipes with 4,500 hydrants. So those kinds of numbers often come up in games. On the next slide, on our wastewater utility, we operate 2 regional wastewater treatment plants that are capable of treating up to 30 million gallons of wastewater per day. Similarly, we have about 500 miles of pipe, and it says here 240 laterals. That must be a typo, because if it was 240 laterals, we'd have already been done with it for this year. Nevertheless, that number is closer to like 50,000. Also, we recycle over 1 billion gallons of recycled water annually. On the next slide, we'll talk about solid waste. We collect more than 100,000 tons of trash and recycling annually. For perspective, our monthly garbage bill at the dump is about $750,000. So it's a pretty big bill we get every month. We're currently recycling about 40 tons of commercial organic waste every week. And we'll give you a little perspective on what that looks like. On the next slide, customer satisfaction to EU is one of our highest priorities. We have a pretty close and intimate relationship with our customers, and in some cases we're directly tied to them. So we'd like to pay attention to what our customers think and what they need. You can see that, and based on these numbers, we run at about a 98% customer satisfaction level. In 2017, we thought there might be something wrong with that, so we decided to expand the scale and make it a little bit more granular. And lo and behold, our score actually went up in the very satisfied category. So we're still at the 98% satisfaction level, but we strive to keep that, because in our minds, there's really nowhere to go with that but down, and we don't want to do that. So on the next slide, talk about some of the things in terms of our accomplishments. It seems like a lot longer than about a year ago, but it was about a year ago when we actually signed our long-term water supply contract with the Bureau of Reclamation. This little video, we're really stressing out the new system, I think. It looks
Is that a TikTok video?
Yeah, it looks like something from the 1980s, actually, Max Headroom. But here you see our city manager, Dom Casey, signing the contract for Roseville. This was the culmination of about 10 years worth of work, really compressed during the last 2 years to get this contract signed. Really big day. Many of you were able to join us at this event. It was very long, very expensive, very arduous, but we had a window of time in which to get this done, and we did it. Now, we've since been sued by others, not directly sued, but other parties have sued us, which we expected. We're going to see how that turns out in the wash. No big problems right now. On the next slide, if it's there. Oh boy, here's the next fun one. Remember when I talked about 40 tons a day? This isn't 40 tons a day. This is about half of that. This is how we currently treat organic waste out at the landfill. We mix it with your green waste bin materials. This is probably not the best way to do it on into the future, but for now, this works. We're in the process right now of evaluating a number of different technologies and methods and means of dealing with it, because as many of you know, we're now going to be required in the next couple of years to expand this service on the residential scale. So we're going to have a lot more green waste to deal with, and it's a whole nother operational challenge. On the next slide, we're talking about a project that we completed, actually finished up last year. That was the improvements at the Dry Creek wastewater treatment plant, where we did some process control improvements to better remove nutrients from the wastewater stream. And at the same time, we also retrofitted our energy recovery facility there, where we have a cogeneration plant. We're able to generate electricity and heat for part of our digestion process. What was notable about this is we did this while this plant was fully operational. So much of what we did involved working with the internal mechanisms of the plant, which simply just can't be shut off. On the next slide, this is a depiction of a new digester that's being constructed out at Pleasant Grove. Much like what we have at Dry Creek, these digesters will aid us greatly in the digestion of biosolids and in the production of fuel. At Pleasant Grove, we expect to build, and a companion project is to build a fueling project which will produce compressed natural gas to fuel our solid waste fleet at an equivalent diesel cost of $2.50 a gallon in perpetuity. So these are the kinds of things that you can do when you own your own utilities. Really, really good project. Next project, and we're jumping around. Go backwards, please. Yep. The next one. No, keep going forward, I'm sorry. We showed 2 round things. I think we really freaked out the
It was at the end
projection
of the
system.
video.
Anyways, I'll cut it to the short. The other project that was there that looked like 2 round discs is we're building a pump and tank station also next to Pleasant Grove Wastewater Treatment Plant. Appreciate Councilman Alvord and his neighbors enduring the construction out there. There's a lot of stuff going on, but we're going to get it in here pretty shortly. That tank site will help us do a number of different things besides meeting fire flow for the community. It will also help us blend different types of water that come into the city, be it from Barton Road, be it from groundwater, be it from PCWA, or someday maybe the Sacramento River Treatment Plant. So that's a key facility. In the previous slide, you saw some other diagrams. We wanted to talk about a couple of projects that we're working on now that are actually part of a larger program of activities. You see in this wheel, we talk about recycled water expansion, groundwater expansion, surface water diversity, and continued water use efficiency. I'm going to speak to a couple of projects here, namely in the next slide. We'll talk about the groundwater expansion program. This last year, if you've been around town in Roseville, you've seen my staff basically drilling holes like a pincushion all over the city. What we're doing is we're looking for favorable spots and favorable geology to site wells. We're hope to be the recipients of a WIFIA grant available through the US EPA, which is going to greatly increase our ability to accelerate this program. We'd planned on doing this over the next 20 years or so, but the WIFIA grant and its low interest rate will really help us accelerate this program, hopefully before we run into the next dry spell and really need them. But we've located those 6 sites. We're going to be under contract to build in at least 2 of them to start, and then with another 4 to follow real quick. Its conjoined project here is expanding our recycled water program. As many of you know, I said previously about using 1 billion gallons. Most of that's used for landscape irrigation right now and for some industrial process water out of the Roseville Energy Park. But we also know that regulations are changing. Recycled water regulations are changing. Our ability to discharge treated water into the creeks is going to become more and more expensive over time. And the question begs, what do we do with this recycled water? If we have to treat it to this higher level, are there other uses that we can use that water for to complementary add to our water supply portfolio? So you've seen some stuff come through the council of late, many of which are scientifically related. We're doing a number of research studies and scientific panels to look at the efficacy of using this advanced treated recycled water in different ways. So that's a study we anticipate taking the better part of the next couple of years as we kind of hash through this. But this is really a 10 to 20 years sort of project, but we want to be mindful of what that has in store for us today. Next slide. Oh, there's the tank I mentioned earlier, the West Side Tank and Pump Station. It's right next to that storage center that was just built on the south side of the Pleasant Grove plant. You can see here they're preparing foundations, doing a lot of things. They're going vertical with that really, really quick. So on the next slide, we'll talk about recycling. I mentioned previously about what we're doing with organics. This is really the focus of our attention the last couple of years because the state regulations that changed in SB 1383 are really quite extensive. They're quite extensive requirements. They're very impactful to our residents from an operational perspective. And lastly, they can be hugely expensive. So for the last 3 or 4 months, we've been conducting a pilot program out in the Mistywood neighborhood area to test out and see what does going to a 3-can system look like. And I've received some questions from some people. Most people know we currently operate a 2-can system, one big bin that's black, the next bin next to it that's green. We're looking at what happens when we use a blue bin for recyclables. And we're finding out some pretty amazing things actually in this pilot. One is that people are very willing to use it. People really enjoy having the blue bin. But as we anticipated, many people are still struggling to find where do I put the next bin. But the possibility exists for us in the future that depending on what we choose to do, what makes the most sense, that ability to go to that third bin will matter to us a whole lot. So that's why we kind of wanted to test it out right now. But many thanks to our participants who've participated in this and done so very well. Next slide. kind of sum it up here, our focus in EU is always on, expansions and continued rehab for greater reliability of the city. For us, business continuity is everything. We can't just take the day off. We're running a 24/7 business, holidays. My neighbors are still amazed that we continue to pick up the trash on Christmas Day. And when you explain to them the impacts of what happens when you take Christmas Day off, it sort of blows their minds when you start thinking about it. But that's what we do. We're in a constant process of rebuilding, rehabbing, redoing all of the pipes, all of the stuff that's underground that nobody sees, millions and millions of dollars. We're also fostering the next generation of utility professionals. As I've discussed before you, the next generation of people that are coming up through the ranks are not necessarily interested in the utility service. And we're finding it very difficult to recruit and attract people in the trades, be they welders, be they pipe fitters, folks of that nature. We're really trying to start fostering that interest level through our EUC program and through some of the cooperative education programs. And I'm proud to say that there's a number of individuals who are in fact interested in that. They just never knew it. So it's an extensive outreach effort that we continue to get better at. And lastly, I'll focus on partnerships. Much of what Roseville's been able to do over the last decade or so has really been through regional partnerships where we can align our business interests with those of others and speak with one voice. I think many of you have experienced that, certainly at the Cap to Cap or at different sessions where we've went in as more of a delegation instead of a single voice. And I think we've really benefited from that, so that's something we continue to do. So the next slide. I want to thank you for your time here this evening and hopefully be able to answer all of your questions. We are an integrated utility. The best thing, from my perspective, that ever happened to Roseville is it kept ownership of all of its utilities, because a lot of the things that I talked about here tonight would not even be possible if our utilities were owned and operated by different entities. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you for your presentation. Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Plecker? Shall we?
A real quick one. Rich, you know how you were doing the testing on Melody or Misty Wood?
Yes.
With the recycle bin?
Yes.
Could they put all kinds of recycling things there in, or just one kind? I mean, is it?
Yes, plastics, cardboard, bottles, cans, all the above. And that's proving to be way more popular than we had ever anticipated.
Okay, so it's everything. It wasn't just cans or so.
All recyclables. The troublesome piece is food waste with your green waste. That one's a little bit thorny. And we knew that was going to be a thorny one to deal with. We're still not quite sure how we're going to deal with that.
Okay, thank you.
So that's my question, too, if we can just, so those folks in the pilot program there in Misty Wood, are they putting their organics in with their in the green can?
Correct. That's the currently accepted disposal methodology, short of yet another separate can for food waste.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that it's headed that direction, that potentially either a fourth? I
really don't want to go there. Personally, I want to try to figure out how we can do this with that third can, because perhaps it's from my own selfish sense, 4 cans gets to be a little bit ridiculous just from a logistical standpoint. Plus, and frankly, we need the organics with the green waste because that's how they will be turned into compost. That's most favorably. So separating them out is not really doing anything for us constructively. So
you said the blue can's working out well, but can you just talk a minute about the green can with the organics in there? Do residents complain about that?
I think most people are concerned about odors and smell. And this was particularly more so back when it was warmer. Haven't heard as many comments about it of late. It's, with it being colder, odors aren't quite so bad. I think part of it has to do, too, with learning how to do this. It's a new practice. It's a new process. Shockingly, not shockingly, but interestingly, we have a number of new residents to town that are from the Bay Area where this is actually a well-practiced process for them. And so we have a little bit of learning to do there. Part of it has to do with, the yuck factor of eggshells and bacon grease and stuff like that we want to now put in with the green waste. So some of it's just really, how do you manage that at home?
Yeah, I mean, they probably have to have containers on their counters and those sorts of things, and it's another run out to the garbage.
That's what I've seen is
foreign to us, but
a little pot or a vat, and then you dump it in there, and it'll be new for us.
Yeah.
It'll be very new for us.
We can get there. Okay, Councilmember Mendoza, do you have questions? No questions?
And on the comment I heard about the food waste is that bags, you can't use bags and things because you can't throw those in the green can. So
Correct.
that is the messy part, is you got to go either dump
Messy.
and toss your thing or.
They also make biodegradable bags, which we're researching as well. But it's another one of those products that doesn't seem to be
How
quite
quick will
ready
it
for
degrade?
prime time yet. Yeah,
It's like the flushable wipes, you know.
it's a flushable wipe. You guys remember?
We'll see about that. Vice Mayor Hadashot, do you have any questions?
I just
or
learned
comments?
that when I go throw my coffee grounds and with the yard clippings, I'm doing the right thing, huh?
You are, actually. And if you think about it, if you run a backyard composting that you might get from, Costco or a nursery center, you're putting banana peels and coffee grounds and stuff in with yard clippings, and that's exactly what we're doing, except on an industrial scale. So we have learned that if we go, we'll have to change green waste and compost recycling to a weekly collection, and then some others can perhaps go to a biweekly collection. So these are the things we're learning during a pilot, and that's why it's important to do that.
Yeah, I know I'd be interested in, when the time's right and we're able to do this, having another infrastructure tour of EU and what's going on. You got a lot of exciting things, and it's always good to have a refresher, whether it's water or wastewater.
Always welcome. Always, and we're
Get
looking
out there
forward
and
to it.
rake the on the conveyor belt.
We have several new people to the Public Utilities Commission, too, that haven't got their tour yet for obvious reasons, and so
Happy to join them.
we'll have quite a tour.
Agreed. You've answered a number of questions that I had, especially when around hiring and staffing and being able to maintain those staffing levels in a COVID world. Just was curious about that, but you touched on it. And then the video had the digester, another digester under construction. Was that a current video? Is it still under construction?
There's two of them, actually, that are currently under construction. They'll be, for the most part, finished within the next year or so. We won't be finished for probably another 6 months after that, but we'll get all the noise and the dust and all of that stuff done with here pretty shortly. But that's a key component to that process of making fuel.
It's fascinating. I don't know how the science works, but
we can show you.
You've tried.
We tend to lose people.
Yeah. Yep. I've enjoyed the time out there with you. Okay. Well, if the council doesn't have any other questions,
Thank you.
this is just for informational item only. Okay, and that's the last item on our agenda. Dom, any other reports from staff?
No further reports, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Alva, do you want to start on any council reports?
I know we're getting ready for our assignments and everything, and going to be changing on some boards and commissions for the new year. Looking forward to that. The only comment report I have is I've just, so much going on in social media right now. It's just a crazy world right now, and probably the wise ones are the ones that are just getting out of it. But I just want to remind the community that your city council is a nonpartisan representation board, as well as your county supervisors. And people's personal beliefs and how they vote are usually different. And so I just throw that out there. I know my council members here, we care about the city and we represent you as a community, and appreciate that support. And there's just a lot of craziness going right now. Looking forward to being past all that too. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Hadashot?
Good to be back. See you virtually next week.
Councilmember Mendoza?
I just want to congratulate everybody that got appointed to a board this evening, especially those that are seeking or got reappointed to a second term. I just want to touch on something. Roseville, we annually get numerous accolades in various publications due to our quality of life and our sense of community here within this city. And I think it's our quality of life and that we have here in Northern California, and that sense of community and that awareness and that just really, vibrant, upliftingness is not really the right word, 'cause it's probably not even a word. But we draw people to this city that other cities, even with the same amenities that we have, wouldn't. And we're just very special and very blessed that way that we can do that. I just want to remind everybody that, community is everybody, and so there's a lot of stuff that's going on. A lot of us are glad to be out of 2020. Unfortunately, like some of my COVID weight, some of the stuff from 2020 has carried over into 2021 that I wish had stayed in 2020. But with that said, just take a moment, breathe, and let's be kind to one another. It's not necessary to battle everything, because that's not what we are here as a community. That's not who we are as a city. I think all of us here, we strive for goodness. There's things that we all want to do. Not all of us are going to get to do it, but at the end of the day, it's our community that makes us who we are and makes us desirable to other people and businesses that come here. And so, we all have a responsibility to be a little better and do a little better. So I would just challenge all of us. It's still new enough in the year. Let's just be kind to one another. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rakucci?
Just a couple things, probably echoing on what everybody else has just said. We are getting our assignments and doing, just before our meeting, we had a legislative and regulatory kind of workshop. And that's what we're doing on a lot of our other committees, just kind of seeing how some of our goals and objectives for our city and how we can work with the city, the state, and at the federal level. I think there's a lot of things to be hopeful for. To be able to get our stay-at-home lifted, and so that we can be out and about, and also be healthy and safe too, because both aren't. They both can happen at the same time. And so I'm happy for that. I'm happy that today was sunny, and I think we all needed some sun and fun. And also the fact that we've been waiting for a long time, and it came to fruition, is the apartments on Main Street, and that real people can now live there, and there's little play areas there. Haven't got to see it yet. I'm looking forward to when we can see it, but there's like 65 apartments there, and there's going to be people who may not have had a chance to have a place to live, will, and most of them, they're going to be veterans, low-income households, and people, some with some handicaps. And it's very exciting that we have that opportunity to help people in Roseville. That's it.
Thank you. I have a few comments to make, and then don't let me forget to open up public comment at the very end as well. But we have these new monitors in front of us, and we have cameras, and I think we've got a big screen behind us. And we also have a month in between our last meeting, and that was over the holidays, really to allow our staff to be able to upgrade the systems that we have in here. So I want to just take a moment and thank Brian Jacobson, Elijah Wilbur, and Stephanie Patton for their work over the holidays to overhaul this room to provide technology upgrades that includes broadcasting in high definition, and our online streaming on our website, as well as the live streaming on our YouTube channel, and also to our vendors and partners to participate remotely. And I think it's going to be able to help us communicate more efficiently and transparent with our audience, especially as we know that this is the direction that we're headed. So I want to just express our gratitude for them. If you've sat back here, you realize that those monitors were probably 20 years old, and everybody looked very sunburned and age damaged. So hopefully this is improvement. I don't know with the mask on, but we'll see. A couple other things to mention. This coming weekend is a holiday weekend across the country. Monday will be a holiday to honor the birthday and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He epitomized respect for nonviolence, our Constitution, and democratic institutions. He successfully employed a strategy of nonviolent activism to overcome centuries of racial discrimination. And he reshaped American democracy and profoundly influenced nonviolent struggles around the globe. So over the weekend in Placer and Sacramento County, there will be virtual events. The first is a third annual Placer County Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebration from 8 to 9 a.m., January 18th. And it's to encourage inclusive opportunities in Placer County by building bridges and helping others live up to shared purpose to serve all. There is a website that is placermlkday.com. And the second event in our region is the 22nd annual Sacramento MLK Celebration Committee, 5 p.m. Saturday, January 23rd. And the information regarding that virtual event can also be found online, mlkcelebrationssacramento.org. Lastly, I wanted to mention that a few months back, the council had a discussion with our city manager about a number of the hotels, motels in the Harding, North Sunrise corridor that were problematic, and we know that they have done some operations there over the last few months. They have provided us with data about all of the calls for service. We all received a copy of the letters that were sent to the hotel operators. The 3 that I saw this week all go to a same address in Granite Bay, which I thought was interesting. And looking over the letters that they were sent, they are now aware, as if they couldn't be before, that the calls of service at the 3 letters that I read, one of them had 348 calls for service in 1 year. The other one had 385 calls in 1 year. And the Heritage Inn, in a 2-year period, had 902 calls in a year, which I find really unacceptable. So I know in that letter, they were given an opportunity, we requested time to meet with them by the end of the month or first part of next month so that we can have a open conversation about what's happening there. So I just wanted to talk to our city manager, or maybe talk about next steps, because one might assume that they are not responsive. So I just want to put it back to what happens next if we get a response with a response, or if there's no response.
Sure. Thank you for that. I think that first I'd be remissified and say that we have an excellent police department who does great work. And one of the things that they do is analysis called crime mapping, right? And so what that does is they analyze the entire city, they map it, and then essentially these heat map pop up showing different areas that potentially are problem areas where maybe there's quality of life issues, there's more calls for service. And once those are identified, we're able to work together not only with the police department, with code enforcement, community development, the neighborhood associations, and to look for these issues and ways to help resolve them. Hopefully sometimes, most times mutually if we can. And this was the first attempt, as our mayor outlined. We sent letters to some of the hotels that we were seeing the excessive calls from, in addition to reaching out to some of the neighbors and doing that through Arcona, where we've set up meetings with them to discuss some of the challenges that they're seeing and hearing, and so we can engage in that piece. We've actually heard back from one of the hotels that got an early letter, and I'm generally an optimistic person, and so I'll share that. We did receive a letter indicating that some of the recommendations that we made, such as not taking cash payments over a certain amount of time, controlling the entrance and exit, having a log of folks that stay there, lights, cameras, things that generally create a safer environment and discourage behavior that may generate those calls. They were very open to it. They didn't offer a timeline, but they did agree to putting some of those improvements in and look forward to further discussion with us. And so what we're doing now is we're analyzing all of that information and data, and hoping that obviously we hear back and set up that initial meeting with the intent to come back to the city council, where we'll have our police chief provide a crime analysis report of this heat mapping in these areas, and share some of the successes at that point of where we're at, and then some of what those next steps will be. Because quite candidly, we're working through some of those right now, what those next steps will be. It will be really based on the reaction and the compliance that we get. And so this is something that we recognize. One of the council's top priorities is a safe and healthy community, and we certainly want to work toward that end and ensure that the quality of life As Councilmember Mendoza mentioned, we protect it, we preserve it, and it's equitable across the entire city, and we'll work to that end.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, unless anyone has any other comments, I will open it up to public comment. And those who would like to make a last comment on any item that is not on the agenda are invited to call in to 916-774-5353, or they may email at publiccomment@roseville.ca.us. No one has called yet? Any other final comments? Okay, I know we have a delay, so I want to make sure to give them time. I will note that we are going to meet virtually next Wednesday, 6 p.m., and that will be the last meeting of the month. So seeing that, I will close public comment, and I will adjourn our meeting until January 20th. Thank you, everyone.